Hey there, Wide Awake Horror family. Thanks for tuning in. If you're part of the family, then you're a legend. However, over 90% of you aren't subscribed. So please take this time to smash that sub button and hit that like button to lock it in. We really appreciate each and every one of you guys. One last thing. Leave a comment on where you're listening from. I would really love to interact with my fellow supporters. Comment down a hello too, and we will respond. Your support helps these stories reach new viewers and grows our family even more. I first saw the invite in my email late one Friday night. It was curt, almost clinical. Dinner at my place. No emojis, no extra flourish. Just that. Normally, I would have swiped left, but something about the simplicity hooked me. Daniel and I matched a week earlier on a niche site for people who love obscure documentaries. Our chats were sparse but interesting. He sent links to films I'd never heard of, and I shared playlists from bands only a handful of people knew. There was an energy in our exchange that felt offbeat in the best way, like uncovering a secret path through a familiar park. So when he asked me to dinner at his apartment, I agreed without hesitation. His place was in an old building downtown, the kind with narrow hallways that smelled vaguely of must and history. The door buzzed open when I rang. I stepped into a dim foyer, everything in shades of gray except one wall covered in framed film stills. Daniel appeared from the kitchen, wearing a plain black shirt and that slight crooked grin. He led me to a small dining area lit by a single lamp, the kind artists use for mood lighting. Candles flickered too, though unlit, lending a quiet anticipation. I felt like I was stepping onto a set. We ate to the low hum of a record player spinning something I didn't recognize. The food was simple: roasted vegetables, homemade bread, a bottle of red wine. Each bite felt like a casual conversation, except there was none. He asked minimal questions, never stared too long, and never left the room. It was comfortable in its own strange way. After dinner, he suggested a movie, an old experimental film he said was a personal favorite. The projector whirred, and for a while I lay on the couch, lost in grainy black and white images dancing across the wall. When the credits rolled, I stretched and realized it was past midnight. Daniel stood by the projector, his back to me. He didn't say anything, just moved across the room and opened a file cabinet. I watched as he rifled through papers and pulled out a small remote. He pointed it at what I thought was an innocuous bookshelf. Suddenly, a panel slid open, revealing a bank of monitors. My heart sank. Every screen showed me different angles of me sprawled on the couch, eating bread, sipping wine, laughing at film glitches. I froze. He turned, holding the remote like it was the most natural accessory. On the screens, a countdown timer blinked, then reset. A small overlay of each feed said "online," with a number beside it climbing slowly, 27, 28, 29. I realized my stomach had gone cold. He walked over and knelt beside the monitors. Without looking at me, he explained how he'd set up cameras in the ceiling, behind the smoke detector, hidden in the bookshelf, even one inside a fake DVD case. He described the paywall subscription tiers. Standard viewers got a single angle, premium members got picture-in-picture, and Grandmasters got exclusive real-time audio. He sounded proud, like an artist unveiling his masterpiece. The pride twisted my gut. I sat there, frozen, as he detailed how he'd recorded every moment since I walked in. Every laugh, every stretch, every quiet breath. He told me about the chat room, people commenting on my expressions, betting on what I'd do next. Their favorite moment was when I spilled wine on my shirt and muttered under my breath. I felt exposed, every private twitch laid bare. I scrambled to my feet and backed away, knocking over a lamp. The bulb shattered and sparks popped. He didn't flinch. He reached out and grabbed my arm, his grip firm but calm. "Don't worry," he said, voice flat. "I won't delete the streams until I make enough to cover my new camera." The words were casual, transactional, like someone discussing which souvenir to buy on vacation. I yanked my arm free and bolted for the door. My phone buzzed in my pocket, notifications from my social accounts. Strangers tagging me, sending links to his site. I didn't dare look. The hallway felt endless, and I clutched my purse like it was a lifeline. Behind me, I heard the door click shut, then footsteps following. I ran. Once I was in a taxi, I texted a friend to pick me up at the curb. I couldn't go home, to my apartment that could be bugged too, but I needed to feel safe somewhere. I replayed the night in my mind, every detail twisting like a film reel in my head. How long had he been planning this? How many other people had walked into that apartment, unaware they were being broadcast? I thought about the paywall, that money people were shelling out to watch me live, unaware that I was a person, not content. Over the next few days, I called the local station to report the site, but they shrugged. "We'll look into it," they said, in that tone officials use when nothing happens. I tried to contact the hosting service, but they claimed no responsibility. Daniel's archive remained online, the site's still alive. Friends messaged me screenshots. "Look at this creepy set. Are you okay?" I felt like a ghost, haunted by my own image. I changed my passwords, locked down every account. I considered moving, but the thought of packing with trusting a landlord felt impossible. Each night I shut off my phone, turned the Wi-Fi off, closed the blinds, and sat in a silent apartment, half expecting to hear a click behind me. I couldn't trust anyone. Every door felt like a threat. Weeks later, I got an email from Daniel. No subject line, just his name in the from field. Inside was a single line, payment received. Enjoy the highlights. Attached was a video, a 5-minute montage of me laughing, sifting through crumbs, gazing at the screen. I felt sick. He'd edited it, polished it, packaged me like merchandise. I deleted the email and stared at the blank screen for minutes. Then I opened a new browser window, incognito, and typed the URL of an underground forum my friend sent me. There I found posts about similar setups. Other people who'd been recorded without consent, their private moments sold for views. Some were worse, proposals broadcast live, first kisses auctioned, breakups turned into entertainment. Dana was not unique. He was part of a grim network. I realized two things. First, I would never feel safe the same way again. Second, hiding was not enough. I had to reclaim my story. I sat down and began writing every detail I could remember, the way the camera blinked, the click of the panel, the trickle of the timer resetting. I described the monitors, the paywall tiers, the echo of my footsteps in the hallway. I documented everything: screenshots, timestamps, emails, friend messages. I published it to a blog I set up under a pseudonym. I wrote in a raw, rambling style like I was talking to my own reflection. I hoped someone would listen. The post went viral among other survivors. People reached out, sharing their stories, offering tips on digital self-defense, capitalism's darkest corners. It felt like a small victory, my voice cutting through the static. But Daniel's site remains. Every so often, I check its status. Sometimes it's gone, only to resurface days later. The servers jump from country to country. He hides behind proxies, anonymous payments, fleeting registrations. I fight back with reports and blogs and legal threats, but nothing sticks. Now, every time I step into a room, I search for cameras. Every cast ceiling, every innocuous object. I live in a constant game of hide and seek with a stranger I once found charming. And I still can't shake the thought that somewhere, someone is paying to watch me, thinking they own a part of my life. There's no grand lesson here, no tidy wrap-up. It just keeps going, still streaming, still waiting for the next viewer to log in. I spotted the text from Chloe as I was swiping through my phone in the back row of history class. It popped up in the group chat. "Dinner at mine tonight, bring your appetite." I glanced up at the clock, 3:30, and figured it was just another chill hangout. I'd met Chloe at a campus rally last month, bonding over protest signs and late-night coffee runs. She seemed fun, a little edgy, always challenging me to think differently. Plus, her apartment wasn't far from the student union. Why not? That evening I biked over, the city lights humming as I coasted down the main street. Her building was one of those brick tenements with creaky steps and a lobby bulletin board plastered with lost cat flyers. I knocked, and the door swung open before I could ring. Inside, her place looked like a cross between a thrift shop and art studio. Mismatched chairs, second-hand posters in weird frames, and plants spilling from every windowsill. She greeted me with a grin and led me to the kitchen, where a pot of something simmered on the stove, filling the air with garlic and rosemary. We chatted as she stirred my backpack on the counter, toes tapping with the smell of food. She offered me a drink, iced tea sweetened just right, then asked me to clip something to my shirt. I blinked at the small metal disc dangling from a chain. "What's this?" I asked. She laughed, saying it was a wearable cam for her new project, a vlog about food and friendship. She promised I'd look amazing, that she'd edit out any weird moments. It sounded kind of cringe, but her excitement was contagious. I clipped it to my collar and shrugged, thinking I'd delete the footage later if it felt too weird. We ate at a low table strewn with bowls of pasta, garlic bread, a salad tossed with tangy vinaigrette. The pasta was smoky, like chorizo mixed with sun-dried tomatoes, and I inhaled every bite. We traded stories about crappy summer jobs and the weird ways our roommates drove us insane. I laughed so hard my stomach hurt. The cam bounced against my shirt with each gesture, but I hardly noticed. It was just another quirky evening with a friend. Then I saw it. She propped her laptop on a chair across the room, screen facing the couch. The glow hit her face in the dim light. I squinted. On the screen was a live stream interface, cat feed, viewer count, donation buttons. Suddenly my ribcage tightened. I glanced at Chloe, but she was still stirring her tea, eyes bright. I kept eating, heart hammering against every spoonful of pasta. The chat scrolled too fast to read, but I caught bits. Wow, she's so real that she doesn't know we're watching. Send more. I said nothing, though a million thoughts collided in my head. She hadn't mentioned streaming live. The vlog pitch was later editing, not this. And revenge. That word flickered in my memory. She talked about Tyler Bates, the local councilman who made jokes about students being freeloaders, mocked our protests on the city live stream. I remembered her saying she wanted to teach him a lesson, give him a taste of public humiliation. Did this count? When I paused to refill my glass, the chat doubled its pace. A new user just tipped a donation. Others cheered. The viewer count jumped from 70 to 90. Chloe glanced up, smiled at the screen as if greeting old friends. She mouthed a thanks, leaned close to the laptop, typed something. My throat went dry. I asked if we could pause the stream, talk about it. She shrugged, said not yet, that viewers were hooked and she wanted maximum impact. She said once she got enough footage, she'd package it and send a link to Bates' office along with a note. He'll eat his words, she'd said. He can't make fun of students when his followers see real ones. I realized I was in over my head. I was meant to be bait in her little trap, unwitting ammunition. I could feel every twitch of my nervous system amplify on screen. Was that joke I just made about my jobless summer self going to be clipped and mocked? Was someone betting on I'd knock over my wine glass again? I forced myself to finish the salad, legs bouncing into the table. I kept my eyes on the flickering laptop, pretending it was a campfire and I wasn't the one roasting under its heat. As she cleared plates, she invited me to help pack up. I grabbed a plate and started rinsing it, thinking of every escape route. The back door, too obvious. The window, too high. I couldn't leave the cam on me. I needed to rip it off, but what if she stopped me? I took a breath, clipped my fingers around the chain and tugged. It popped free and clattered against the sink. My movement caught Chloe's eye. She frowned but didn't say anything. I slipped the disc into my pocket. I didn't think twice when Michael suggested we meet in his parents' basement. He said it was quieter than a coffee shop and way safer than other places he knew. I figured he just wanted privacy, maybe a chill spot to talk. I'd only known him a few weeks after matching on a local volunteer app. We bonded over building tiny houses for charity and random photography walks downtown. He seemed reliable, steady, always texting me good morning, asking about my day. Meeting at home felt intimate in a harmless way, like we were moving past small talk and into something more personal. The stairs leading down smelled like aged wood and old carpet, a faint scent of mothballs mixed with must. The basement door creaked when he opened it, and I stepped inside, blinking against the dim warmth. The walls were lined with bookshelves and old crates, and a couch so lumpy it looked like it had survived a college dorm purge. He pointed to a couple of stools beside a low table cluttered with video game controllers and cardboard models of model airplanes. A single lamp cast a soft glow, enough to read but not enough to see every corner. I handed him a pack of soda cans and he said thanks, rubbing his palms together. He wore a hoodie, jeans, and sneakers, nothing flashy. He motioned for me to sit and shrugged when I asked why down here. He said his parents were on a strict cleaning schedule and didn't want to mess upstairs. It sounded plausible. I didn't want to overthink it. We settled into a comfortable silence as we popped open sodas, and he asked how my week had been. We talked about the garden project I was working on, the fundraiser he was planning. He had neat folders with notes and even a small whiteboard with sketches of birdhouse designs. Everything felt organized, thoughtful. He offered me a granola bar and leaned back. The cushions groaned under him. That's when I noticed the filing cabinet tucked in the corner, half hidden behind a stack of plastic bins. It looked out of place among the dusty models like a relic from some dull office job. Out of curiosity, I leaned forward and ran a finger over the label on one drawer. Personal. I raised an eyebrow, but Michael just said, "Oh, yeah, sorry. It's got my work stuff. My parents kept it from my old apartment." He didn't sound worried, more casual than anything. I nodded, but the label stuck in my head as he popped open the drawer. He pulled out a few folders, then paused, as if he'd forgotten something, and returned them inside. A metal latch clicked shut. He looked at me and smiled, changing the subject to a funny voicemail he'd gotten from his landlord. Relief washed over me. I almost breached some private boundary. We laughed, the tension easing as he described a landlord who couldn't pronounce his name. We spent the next hour gaming, trading controllers, laughing at each other's terrible skills. It felt normal, like hanging out with any friend. Then Michael said he needed to grab something quick from the drawer. Asked if I minded. I thought, sure, no problem. I was curious but didn't want to seem invasive. He stood, walked over, and unlocked the drawer with the key he pulled from his pocket. I watched the top folder peek out, labeled IDs and records. Something fell off, but I forced myself to ignore it. He pulled up 2 laminated cards, handed them to me without looking up. They clacked against my palm as I unfolded them. My eyes blinked twice. One card was his driver's license, but the photo looked off, sharp jawline, same hair, but the name was different. The second was a state ID with a different alias, different birth date, same face. My palms got sweaty. The basement felt suddenly too warm. I stared at the cards, hesitant to hand them back. Michael turned and said, "Check those. Pretty sweet, right? Got them cheap through a guy I know." He sounded proud, like he was showing off a collector's item. I flipped through the IDs again, heart racing. Then I noticed a third card peeking out under the folder flap. I slid it free. It was an arrest warrant, faded edges, official seal. The photo matched him exactly. Wanted for fraud in 3 states: wire fraud, identity theft, grand larceny. My mouth went dry. I didn't think twice when Michael suggested we meet in his parents' basement. He said it was quieter than a coffee shop and way safer than other places he knew. I figured he just wanted privacy, maybe a chill spot to talk. I'd only known him a few weeks after matching on a local volunteer app. We bonded over building tiny houses for charity and random photography walks downtown. He seemed reliable, steady, always texting me good morning, asking about my day. Meeting at home felt intimate in a harmless way, like we were moving past small talk and into something more personal. The stairs leading down smelled like aged wood and old carpet, a faint scent of mothballs mixed with must. The basement door creaked when he opened it, and I stepped inside, blinking against the dim warmth. The walls were lined with bookshelves and old crates, and a couch so lumpy it looked like it had survived a college dorm purge. He pointed to a couple of stools beside a low table cluttered with video game controllers and cardboard models of model airplanes. A single lamp cast a soft glow, enough to read but not enough to see every corner. I handed him a pack of soda cans and he said thanks, rubbing his palms together. He wore a hoodie, jeans, and sneakers, nothing flashy. He motioned for me to sit and shrugged when I asked why down here. He said his parents were on a strict cleaning schedule and didn't want to mess upstairs. It sounded plausible. I didn't want to overthink it. We settled into a comfortable silence as we popped open sodas, and he asked how my week had been. We talked about the garden project I was working on, the fundraiser he was planning. He had neat folders with notes and even a small whiteboard with sketches of birdhouse designs. Everything felt organized, thoughtful. He offered me a granola bar and leaned back. The cushions groaned under him. That's when I noticed the filing cabinet tucked in the corner, half hidden behind a stack of plastic bins. It looked out of place among the dusty models like a relic from some dull office job. Out of curiosity, I leaned forward and ran a finger over the label on one drawer. Personal. I raised an eyebrow, but Michael just said, "Oh, yeah, sorry. It's got my work stuff. My parents kept it from my old apartment." He didn't sound worried, more casual than anything. I nodded, but the label stuck in my head as he popped open the drawer. He pulled out a few folders, then paused as if he'd forgotten something and returned them inside. A metal latch clicked shut. He looked at me and smiled, changing the subject to a funny voicemail he'd gotten from his landlord. Relief washed over me. I almost breached some private boundary. We laughed, the tension easing as he described a landlord who couldn't pronounce his name. We spent the next hour gaming, trading controllers, laughing at each other's terrible skills. It felt normal, like hanging out with any friend. Then Michael said he needed to grab something quick from the drawer, asked if I minded. I thought, sure, no problem. I was curious but didn't want to seem invasive. He stood, walked over, and unlocked the drawer with a key he pulled from his pocket. I watched the top folder peek out, labeled IDs and records. Something fell off, but I forced myself to ignore it. He pulled up 2 laminated cards, handed them to me without looking up. They clacked against my palm as I unfolded them. My eyes blinked twice. One card was his driver's license, but the photo looked off. Sharp jawline, same hair, the name was different. The second was a state ID with a different alias, different birth date, same face. My palms got sweaty. The basement felt suddenly too warm. I stared at the cards, hesitant to hand them back. Michael turned and said, "Check those, pretty sweet, right? Got them cheap through a guy I know." He sounded proud, like he was showing off a collector's item. I flipped through the IDs again, heart racing. Then I noticed a third card peeking out under the folder flap. I slid it free. It was an arrest warrant, faded edges, official seal. The photo matched him exactly. Wanted for fraud in 3 states. Wire fraud, identity theft, grand larceny. My mouth went dry. He leaned against the table, arms crossed, watching me. He said, "I didn't think it'd be an issue since I'm not using them to scan my dates." His tone was casual, like we were discussing weather. I felt my vision blur. Somewhere behind his calm face I saw danger flicker. I stammered out a question. Why here? Why me? He shrugged, as if choosing a basement and a volunteer was a logical choice. He said, "You're smart, I like that. No one else around here asks questions, and these IDs help me keep a low profile. I just need to lay low for a while, get some cash flowing, then move on." I swallowed, trying to steady my breathing. Cash flowing, what did that mean? I realized I'd been naive, trusting this person who slipped underground money through fake identities. He must have been taking money from the garden fundraiser donations, from people he met through volunteer events. My mind raced. How many others had he gotten close to? How many people were out thousands because of him? I felt sick. I wanted to run up the stairs, but thought about the lock on the door, the key he still held. I was trapped in his world for a moment. He said, "I'm not a monster. I just need some time. Promise I'll make it right once I leave town. Just don't leave. I like your company." I held the cards tight, fear and anger warping together. Part of me wanted to shatter them against the table, tear them in half. Another part wanted to sit down and pretend nothing happened. My head pounded as I realized this was a crossroads. Leave and risk him following me, or stay and become part of his cover. The basement felt like a prison. I took a breath. 1, 2, 3. I met his eyes and said, "I have to go." My voice was low flat. He glanced at the IDs in my hand, then back at me. He said nothing, just watched. I placed the cards on the table and turned to leave. The stairs out of the basement felt impossibly steep, each step echoing as I climbed. I expected him behind me, maybe grabbing my backpack, but the door stayed open. I reached the top, half hoped the door would lock behind me. It didn't. Outside, fresh air hit me like a wake-up call. The evening breeze smelled like rain on hot pavement. I texted a friend to pick me up, my hands still trembling around the phone. I didn't look back at the porch light as I walked away. That night, I slept on my friend's couch, half listening to the hum of her city apartment. I called the police the next morning, told them everything I saw. They took my statement but said they'd need more evidence. Michael's case files would be buried in paperwork. I washed my clothes, threw away the granola bar wrapper. I changed passwords, deactivated my volunteer account. I sat with my phone off, listening to the ceiling fan. Days later, the campus paper ran a blurb about a suspected identity thief seen near volunteer events. No names mentioned. I read it with sick fascination. Had he been seen in the lobby? Were they close to catching him? I thought about confronting him at the next meeting, but I knew better. He had those IDs, the network, the lies ready. He could vanish with a weekend's notice. Now, whenever someone suggests meeting at home, I say no. If they insist, I ask too many questions. Why the basement? Why the old candles? Why the locked drawer? It's not paranoia, it's survival. I still think about those laminated cards and the way he held the key. I still feel the weight of that arrest warrant in my hand. There's no neat ending, no clear justice. Just the memory of realizing that someone you trust can have a secret life you'd never imagined, down to the last detail hidden in a dusty basement drawer. I first noticed something was off the night Kevin walked me home after our movie date. He'd been quiet the whole time, practically hovering behind me on the sidewalk as I biked us back to my place. He wore a faded hoodie and those old sneakers that looked too small for him, like he was shrinking into himself to avoid drawing attention. At the time, I chalked it up to shyness. He told me he hated big crowds and preferred one-on-one hangs. I barely registered the weight of his backpack or the way he kept glancing at my phone tucked into my jacket pocket. When I unlocked my apartment door, Kevin asked if he could charge his phone. He held it out like it was a fragile thing, and I hesitated, but his voice was low and polite, almost pleading. I said sure and handed it over, watching as he plugged it into my desk charger. He sat down on the edge of my bed, fiddled with his screen for a minute, then offered me a snack from the bag he'd been carrying. I didn't think twice about the granola bar or the bottled water. He'd been nervous earlier, and I figured he was just hungry or thirsty. After he left, I noticed my phone felt heavier in my pocket. I shut the door, tossed my jacket on a chair, and grabbed the charger to plug in my own phone. It wasn't until I opened my messages that I saw new notifications from an app I'd never installed. The icon was a tiny compass, black and orange, labeled Lock Watcher. Curious, I tapped it and nearly dropped my phone when it started pinging with real-time coordinates. There was a map showing my street, a blinking dot labeled me, and a timestamp that updated every few seconds. My heart pounded. I tapped around, looking for a settings menu or an uninstall option, but the app was locked behind a passcode prompt. I tried every number I could think of. Birthdays, my own passcode, even 0 and 1234. Nothing worked. Panic climbed my spine as I realized this wasn't just some weird tracking gizmo. It was a full-on spyware app built into my system. I opened my contacts and saw a message from a random number. Premium access enabled. Enjoy your private location feed. My stomach lurched. I texted Kevin immediately. Why did you install Lock Watcher on my phone? His reply came faster than I expected. Install was harmless, wanted to feel closer. Then, delete before more people see. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone shaking in my hand, staring at the blinking dot that was tracking me. I felt like an exhibit in some twisted science project, each ping a reminder that I was being sold live to whoever paid for access. Over the next few days, I pretended nothing was wrong. I met Kevin at the coffee shop by my school library, his hair hanging in his eyes, acting like nothing had happened. He asked how I liked the new pizza place downtown. I nodded and sipped my latte, my mind elsewhere. That night, I borrowed my roommate's laptop and tried to research Lockwatcher. I found forum posts talking about auction location feeds, where private detectives bid to track cheating spouses or run background checks. The highest bidder got real-time access for a week. Some users bragged about catching partners red-handed. Others used it to build blackmail files. I clicked through an old thread. One user described paying $200 to follow someone across town, proof for a divorce case. Another sold his own location data for cash, thinking it was anonymous. I realized Kevin must have signed me up without my consent, listing me as Subject X. He probably pitched me as a shy, quiet type, perfect for voyeuristic subscribers. My face burned with shame and anger. I met Kevin again under the guise of hanging out and casually asked about his weekend plans. He shrugged, said nothing special. I pressed, feigning interest. His eyes flicked sideways, and he finally admitted he had to work on a side project. I nodded slowly, heart hammering. What project? I asked, voice low. He hesitated, then said it was something he was developing for a tech startup. I laughed and said, right like Lockwatcher. He froze, mouth opening, then closed again. How did you? He started, then shook his head. He leaned back like he was letting air out of a balloon. I thought you'd be okay with it. Trusting. I felt bile rise as he tried to minimize it. Trusting, I echoed. You sold my every move to strangers. He shrugged. It wasn't personal, just business. That was the moment I realized how little he cared. He blurred the line between friendship and commodity, treating me like a data stream instead of a person. I left him at that table, phone clutched tight, and walked back to my dorm in a daze. I deleted as many apps as I could, changed every password, nuked my phone to factory settings. But I knew he'd reinstall it if he wanted, slip it back in during the next hangout. I felt violated in a way I couldn't articulate. Every ping of a GPS on someone's trail, every hidden app running without permission, suddenly made me feel cold. I called the campus police, explained the spyware and the auction scheme. It took notes, gave me a case number, and recommended I get a new phone. I did, paid out of pocket for a burner phone and a disposable SIM card. I wiped my laptop clean, thought about encrypting my hard drive, locked my bedroom door at night, even though I lived alone. The paranoia felt endless. I tried talking to friends about it, but most brushed it off as tech drama. They said I was blowing it out of proportion, that Kevin probably thought he was doing something innovative. One friend told me to forgive and forget, that everyone makes mistakes. I wanted to scream at her that this wasn't a glitch. It was a betrayal of trust so deep I couldn't imagine recovering from it. Weeks later, I saw an ad on one of those shady websites, track anyone's location in real time. Auction ends soon. I clicked it out of morbid curiosity. The listing description included a picture of a phone screen with a location map that looked alarmingly familiar. The username of the seller was k__dev. I sent a screenshot to campus police and then blocked the site on my network. I pictured Kevin sitting somewhere with his laptop, refreshing the auction page, watching vids rise. After that, I refused to let anyone handle my phone. I canceled coffee shop hangouts, turned down invites to tech meetups, stopped letting people charge their devices at my place. I kept it in my pocket, screen facing down, locked in a case so no one could open it. The world felt smaller and more dangerous. I realized how quickly someone can turn affection into exploitation, trust into currency. There's no neat ending here, no justice served. Kevin's app might still be up somewhere, auctioning my footsteps to the highest bidder, turning my life into data points for someone's profit. And somewhere out there, a private detective might still be following my route to class, my dinner runs, my late-night walks. I can't say I learned a lesson, because the lesson is how little control we have once we hand over our devices. The story just keeps going, ping by ping, until someone decides to turn off the lights. I couldn't believe how simple it started when Emily casually asked me to share my bank statement as if we were swapping playlists. I was sprawled out on my bed, laptop balanced on my knees, half listening to a true crime podcast when her text popped up asking for a PDF of my recent transactions. She called it financial transparency, said it was a trust exercise for her new budgeting challenge. I didn't think twice. Emily always struck me as the rock-solid friend, top of her class, part-time volunteer coordinator, the one everyone leaned on when they needed advice. If she wanted to compare numbers, I figured it would be an interesting way to stay accountable. I exported my statement, hit send, and figured that was that. A couple of days later, my phone buzzed with an email notification. A deposit for £4,000 from a mysterious sender labeled cleared funds. My heart jumped into my throat. I stared at the transaction for what felt like forever, picturing some algorithmic glitch before I even dared to believe it was real. I opened the banking app again, scrolling through my balance and seeing the number sitting there, too big and too clean to be coincidence. I messaged Emily to make sure she'd seen it, hoping she'd tell me it was some kind of joke or test, but her reply came back nonchalant, telling me it was all part of the plan. A dull buzz of panic started at the edges of my skull. Over the next few hours, the reality set in. The deposit was legitimate. It sat in my account, cleared and available to spend. I thought about how it might look on my statement if I withdrew it, flashy, suspicious. But when Emily messaged again, her tone friendly and urgent, asking me to forward half to cover her emergency bills, I froze. This was where it got sticky. I transferred £2,000 without a second thought, staring at the confirmation screen as if it were a dare. I rationalized that this was just part of her grand budgeting experiment, maybe some peer-to-peer financial hack. I had never felt so uneasy sending that chunk of money, but I kept telling myself that Emily wouldn't steer me wrong. The next deposit arrived even faster and was larger, £6,000 this time, with a sender name I didn't recognize. My breathing got shallow as I watched the numbers land in my account. Emily messaged me to split it again, claiming it was for her family crisis and apologizing that she couldn't share details. I felt the first real twist of alarm. This wasn't about budgeting anymore. It was something darker, but I kept playing along. I sent £3,000 her way, fingers trembling. Each time I clicked the transfer button, part of me expected the police to burst through my door. Instead, the app simply showed a completed transaction and a silent balance reduction. By the third week, my account had become a revolving door for six-figure sums. I stopped checking my balance out of fear. I made mental notes not to withdraw too much in one go, to space out transactions so as not to trigger the bank's fraud alerts. Emily's messages became shorter and more insistent. She claimed her sister needed advanced treatment overseas, that all the money had to move fast to meet deadlines. She never sent photos of medical bills or proof of any appointment. She only asked for half the amount each time, like clockwork. The sums kept climbing, and I became numb to it. My evenings were spent scrolling through news articles about money laundering, identifying red flags I now willingly ignored. My paranoia peaked when a mid-level bank manager called to ask about unusual activity. I forced a calm tone and said I was helping out a family member overseas, that I expected some big gifts and was redistributing them. The manager sounded skeptical but couldn't demand too much without cause. I hurried off the call, heart pounding, feeling the walls close in. I realized I was caught in something I didn't understand, trapped by invisible chains of transfers I couldn't justify. My bank account had become a conduit for money I couldn't trace, each deposit another link in a laundering chain I'd willingly supplied. I went to meet Emily at our usual cafe, hoping she'd have answers. She showed up, breezy as ever, clutching a latte and a stack of notebooks filled with scribbled budgets and expense trackers. I confronted her in my head as she waved and sat down. I tried to remain composed, casually asking where all the money was coming from. She brushed it off, talking about unnamed clients and investment partners who needed level-headed intermediaries. She said no one suspected a thing because I was the perfect patsy, an unsuspecting friend with a clean record. My skin crawled as that word echoed in my mind. Patsy. I realized she had never been interested in sharing finances. She'd been grooming me to be her mule. I left the cafe in a daze, my hands shaking around the handle of my coffee cup. The city streets blurred as I walked, thinking about every blind trust I handed her. I called my bank's fraud hotline and spilled everything, admitting I'd transferred questionable sums. They froze my account and advised me to file a police report. Relief and dread pooled together in my stomach. Finally, I'd taken a step toward pulling the plug, but I didn't know if it was too late. I spent the night at a friend's flat, unable to sleep, imagining the cartel network humming behind me, wondering if Emily was watching. The following days felt like wading through molasses. The police detective who took my statement was polite but distant, explaining that laundering networks were hard to track, that funds could vanish in shell companies and anonymous wire transfers. He cautioned me that I might face penalties despite being a victim. That stung more than anything. I felt like I was drowning in my own naivety. I deleted Emily's contacts, blocked her on social media, and changed banks entirely, opening a new account under a fresh name. I cut ties with everyone we both knew, terrified she'd slip through the cracks and vanish me again. Weeks later, I read a brief news mention about a crackdown at a local laundering ring tied to a South American cartel. The media didn't name names or mention my role. It hit me that I could have been a headline or a prison statistic. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting someone to handcuff me for facilitating crime. The money in limbo had become a ghost I couldn't shake. I still get emails with phishing subject lines that eerily mimic Emily's tone, asking for updates for confirmation for help. I delete them without opening, but the memory remains like a scar. There's no neat ending here, no triumphant justice. I still cringe whenever I see a PDF icon, wonder if every email might be a trap. I learned that one simple ask to share a bank statement can unlock doors better left closed, setting off a chain reaction that turns kindness into crime. The only thing I gained was a lesson I never wanted, and the lingering question of whether I'll ever fully escape the debt of trust I unknowingly accrued. I still remember the way Justin's grin lit up when I slid that skillet of pancakes onto the table, like he discovered buried treasure instead of just breakfast. It was our first proper brunch together. He'd slept over after a night of studying for finals, and I figured a fluffy stack of pancakes with maple syrup would be the perfect cure. Justin was the kind of guy who complimented everything you did. Sincere in the way he leaned forward, eyes bright, mouth curved like he meant every word. He told me mine were the best pancakes he'd ever tasted, and that I should open a diner. Maybe I believed him too much. After we ate, he reached into his backpack and pulled out a small white pill in a foil wrapper. He claimed it was a new vitamin D supplement he'd been trying on his doctor's recommendation. He said study sessions in the library's fluorescent lights were giving him headaches and low energy, so his physician suggested this brand. He said I should try one too, insisted it would help clear my brain fog and boost my mood. I hesitated. Vitamins were practical, but also kind of weird to pop like candy. But he was so casual about it, like handing me a mint. He told me to swallow it before I went back to my room to finish that essay I had been procrastinating on. I took it without thinking, chewing the edge of my pen as he laughed at some joke that slipped past me. Within minutes, I felt a wave of drowsiness like someone had turned down the lights in my brain. I shrugged it off, rubbing my temples as I gathered my laptop and books, telling him I'd crash on the couch to write. He nodded, grabbed his phone, and suggested we film a little study with me vlog he'd been planning. He set up his phone on a stack of textbooks, hit record, and went back to texting as I stared at the screen, blinking off and on. The next thing I remember is waking up on my bed with my head pounding. The curtains were drawn tight, and it was the middle of the afternoon. My phone buzzed nonstop on the nightstand, messages, notifications, tags on social media. My vision blurred as I unlocked the screen and saw dozens of missed calls from a random number, then notifications from a thread on a prank forum. Someone had posted a video titled "Watch Her Go from Genius to Gooey in Seconds," and it showed clips of me trying to write, head drooping, eyelids fluttering, lips slurring the words I'd been typing. The worst part was the commentary overlay, laugh tracks, sound effects, running captions mocking my study slump fail. My skin crawled. I clicked the forum link and saw Justin's username next to every comment, replying to people saying how funny it was. Others were tagging their friends. "Dude, look at this. She just keels over mid-sentence." I scrolled until my thumb hurt, screenshotting everything, my heart thudding in my chest. My vision swam and I had to sit down. The video was posted on multiple sites, compiled into short clips, shared on TikTok and Twitter. Each share piled more humiliation. My cheeks burned, not just from the video, but from the realization that Justin had filmed me without my consent, edited me like a cartoon, and uploaded it for strangers to laugh. I grabbed my phone and dialed him, hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. He actually answered, voice breezy. He said, "Oh, hey. You saw it?" Like it was just another thing that happened that day. He asked if I was okay, tone half laughing. I felt bile surge as I shouted at him, demanding to know why he dosed me without telling me it was for content, why he recorded me like bait for clicks. He laughed and said it was just a harmless prank, that everyone loves a watch me fail clip, and he needed the views for his channel. He said he was sorry I felt embarrassed, but he didn't remove it because it was too good. My voice thundered, but I was already slumped against the wall, tears stinging my eyes. I hung up and called my roommate Mara, her name echoing in my head as I stumbled down the hallway. She answered after 2 rings, sounding groggy, and I practically screamed the link to her. She cracked the door open when I banged on her room, eyes wide as she watched a clip of me mumbling gibberish about quantum theory before I collapsed face first on my keyboard. It ended with a loop of me snoring softly, the caption reading "Nap time achieved." Mara's face went white, and she pulled me inside, hugging me tight as I sobbed. We spent the next few hours emailing site admins, begging to have the videos taken down. Some platforms responded with "no violation," others made me jump through hoops. Meanwhile, shares and reposts kept coming, like a wildfire I couldn't extinguish. I deleted my TikTok and Twitter accounts, but it didn't matter. Screenshots of the video lived on in private chats, on prank blogs, in memes. People at school whispered when I walked by, and I caught them smirking behind their hands. The humiliation sat in my gut like a stone. That night, I texted Justin, demanding he delete everything and explain himself. His reply was a cold paragraph about digital content and viral power. He said cancel culture was fickle, and he'd get in trouble if he owned up, so he couldn't. He said if I wanted it down, I have to play along with a follow-up video apologizing on camera. He told me everyone would love a heartfelt sorry moment. I felt like I'd been thrown into a carnival funhouse mirror, my distress a spectacle, my apology fodder for more views. I went to sleep in Mara's bed, nightmares of my own face looping in slow motion over and over. I woke with mascara smudge, pillows soaked, and dread pressing my lungs. I reached for my phone and saw a message alert from a new prank site. Hey, sorry to bother if it's an exclusive revenge edit of your video. Hot link in bio. I threw the phone across the room. My heart pounded with panic and fury. No matter how many I deleted, dozens more sprouted like weeds. The next day, I skipped class under the pretext of feeling unwell. I sat in the library bathroom and researched digital rights, learned about takedown laws and GDDR requests. It was a maze of forms and legal jargon that made me want to puke. I printed everything I could, headed to campus security, and filed an official complaint against Justin for unauthorized filming and distribution. They took statements but warned me it could take months or years to resolve, and there was no guarantee. It felt like telling a ghost to get lost. It might vanish or it might haunt me forever. By evening, I decided I couldn't wait. I texted Justin one last time, telling him I'd go to the police if he didn't delete and issue a public apology by midnight. He ignored me. So I showed up at his apartment, heart pounding so hard I thought it might crack ribs. The door clicked open and there he stood, casual as if he'd been expecting me. He said, "Hey, didn't think you'd come." No guilt in his eyes, just that same grin. I threw my printed screenshots at him, demanding the password to his editing software, the login to those prank accounts. He sighed, grabbed his laptop, and opened the video editor. He hovered over the delete button and hit render. I held my breath as the progress bar crawled. Then it reached 100%. He closed his laptop, looked at me, and said, "That should do it." I paused, waiting to see if the videos would actually disappear. He shrugged. Wet is messy. Might be out there a bit longer. I felt a hollow ache. He deleted the originals, but copies would live on. I turned and walked out, head high despite the lump in my throat. The street air was cold in my lungs, a slap of reality. I realized I might never fully recover from the fallout, but I'd reclaimed something, control over my own story. It wasn't a happy ending, just a reminder that trust can be twisted into clicks, and that some scars don't fade, they just become part of your armor. I still remember the rush of excitement when Lauren texted me about meeting her whole family at her place for dinner. She'd been dropping hints all week, cryptic little stories about her parents' garden, her cousin's new puppy, how they were all dying to meet me. I pictured a warm living room full of chatter and homemade lasagna, classic sitcom family vibes. Lauren and I had only been on a couple of dates, but she was funny, unpredictable, and somehow made me feel like I'd known her forever. I biked over that Saturday evening with a bottle of wine in my backpack and a goofy grin, thinking I was in for a cozy night of getting to know you. Her apartment was on the third floor of an old walk-up, the kind with narrow stairs and creaky banisters that remind you you're in a city with history. I climbed to the top, out of breath, and knocked on her door. When she swung it open, her smile was so bright it made me blink. She wore a floral dress and had her hair pinned back with a sparkly clip. Behind her, I could see a long hallway lined with family photos, parents at graduations, kids playing in parks, faces I assumed were cousins and aunts and uncles I'd soon meet. She led me inside and offered me a glass of iced tea. The living room smelled faintly of vanilla and something fresh baking. She sat me on the couch and disappeared into the kitchen, calling over her shoulder that dinner would be ready in 10 minutes. I settled in, fiddling with my phone, scanning the walls. Every photo was of her smiling with different people, but I didn't see a single one of just her, always a duo or group shot. I chalked it up to a close-knit family. Soon the lights dimmed and voices drifted in from the other room. Lauren reappeared holding 2 plates stacked with steaming enchiladas and rice. She offered me a seat at the dining table, where a dozen chairs circle a wooden top. I picked a seat by a vase of fresh sunflowers, and she invited me to pour my wine. Then the door at the far end of the table swung open and in walked a stream of people, men and women of all ages, kids holding coloring books, grandparents with canes, a teenage boy with a skateboard. They all waved and called my name, a little too perfectly in sync, like rehearsed actors hitting their cues. My stomach twisted. I smiled and waved back, heart racing, as each person introduced themselves with weirdly scripted lines. I'm your boyfriend's cousin, Bradley, welcome. In that precise, enthusiastic tone you hear in infomercials when someone's discovering their favorite new product. They sat and barely touched their food, instead leaning forward, eyes bright, listening to me ramble about my week. Every now and then one of them would scribble something on a notepad and pass it along to the next person, nodding as if that little note was vital intel. Lauren sat beside me, whispering encouragements. Just be yourself, tell them more about your internship. The whole thing felt like I was the star of a bizarre reality show, and they were running a focus group on me. I forced myself to answer questions, laughing at jokes I barely heard, staring at the flicker of a hidden camera lens I was sure must be tucked somewhere in the room. After about 20 minutes of this surreal dinner, Lauren asked if I liked dessert. I nodded, desperate for something normal. One of her family members pushed a trolley out holding plates of chocolate cake and vanilla ice cream. It looked so ordinary I almost believed I was in a normal home. That's when the lights cut out. Every bulb went dark, and the table exploded in gasps. My heart thudded as I heard murmurs and a few footsteps shuffling in the dark. I fumbled for my phone's flashlight and clicked it on. The beam cut through the darkness, catching every face frozen in shock. Then a spot in the corner of the room lit up. A small stage light on a tripod, its red recording light blinking. A voice came over a hidden speaker. Great job, everyone, rolling on the reveal. I felt Lauren's hand on my arm, guiding me toward the light. My flashlight trembled in my grip as the rest of the group turned on cell phone torches, pointing them at me like 1,000 tiny spotlights. A woman stepped forward wearing a clipboard and a headset I recognized from theater workshops. She smiled and said, "Thank you so much for being a part of our experiment in social trust. We love how genuine you were." Genuine? Trust experiment? My chest tightened. Lauren let go of my arm and motioned around the room. "They're actors," she said, voice low but clear. "Every one of them. I wanted to see what you'd do, how you'd fit in." The family members began applauding softly, like they were in a play getting ready to break character. My hands tightened on the phone as I spun around, mouth dry. I realized all those photos on the wall were staged headshots. All laughter was scripted. Every whispered note was part of a script. I felt exposed, like someone had stripped away my clothes in the middle of Times Square. I asked, voice wavering, why? Lauren took a breath, struggling to meet my eyes. She explained it was for a documentary on building trust in relationships, that she was studying how people respond when everything around them feels familiar but turns out fake. She said she believed in radical honesty but needed a baseline of trust first. If I could handle this, I could handle anything with her. I felt like the punchline of a joke I never wanted to hear. My fingers unclenched and I pointed the flashlight at her. "You turned my life into your thesis," I said quietly. "I thought I was meeting your real family." She nodded and said yes, but that real families are messy, unpredictable, and she didn't want those variables. I swallowed, rage and humiliation twisting in my gut. She said she'd been careful. Nobody ever said or did anything harmful. It was all harmless fun. I tried to laugh at that, but couldn't. I gathered my things without looking at anyone. The group didn't follow me. It just stepped back into shadows. Lauren followed silently as I passed the tripod and the speaker. The hallway air felt cold after the warmth of that living room. I didn't say a word as I climbed the stairs, each step echoing. Lauren caught up at the top and said she was sorry, but I kept walking, not wanting to see her face or hear another word. Outside, the street was quiet, streetlights spilling half shadows onto the pavement. I tucked my phone back into my bag and felt a lump in my throat. A car drove by, headlights cutting through the dark, but I didn't flag it down. I started walking as if each footstep could put more distance between me and everything that happened inside that apartment. I didn't text Lauren that night. I didn't respond to her apologies or her video messages explaining the scientific importance. I changed my locks the next day and got rid of the box of brownies she'd left on my doorstep. Friends asked if I met her family yet. When I said no, they gave sympathetic looks. I still feel jittery around groups of people, always wondering if they're watching me as part of some hidden project. I saw Ryan's car pull up outside the coffee shop. It was a sleek black BMW M4 coupe that looked way too fancy for someone who claimed to be jobless. I'd met him on an app for people in transition, recent grads, career changers, that kind of crowd. His profile said between gigs, living the dream. I thought it was adorable. When we first messaged, he joked that he was financially secure thanks to family connections, which I thought was reasonable until he spent 30 minutes telling me about his trust fund. He never named names, just leaned back like he was casually discussing what avocado toast he'd buy next. That afternoon at the coffee shop, his smile was a little too bright, his posture too relaxed. He wore a white button-down and expensive sneakers, sipping an oat la like he was sampling wine. We chatted about our favorite books and the local art exhibit he visited. He said he spent most of his time volunteering at senior centers, which sounded wholesome. He told me his mom was an artist, his dad an entrepreneur who fell on hard times and couldn't run his company anymore. He said he kept the family's losses private because people gossip. I nodded, thinking it was noble to protect privacy. After coffee, he suggested a drive along the coast. I hopped in his car, my backpack sliding onto the seat next to me. We drove in silence at first, the engine purring, the ocean visible through the windows. He pointed out beaches and old lighthouses, naming them like a tour guide. Then he opened up about his financial struggles, how he lost his job at a startup, how investors dried up, how he was scraping by with savings that threatened to vanish any day. He said he'd taken odd jobs mowing lawns and dog walking, but then paused, dropping his voice. Look, truth is, I've been discreetly helping myself to the accounts of elderly folks in care homes. I swear it's just enough to stay afloat. They don't even notice until I'm gone. My heart jumped into my throat, but his tone was calm, almost apologetic, like someone confessing to borrowing sugar from a neighbor. I blinked at him as the highway blurred by, unsure if I heard right. He said he didn't do it maliciously. He targeted the lonely ones who never checked their bank statements. It's not theft, he insisted. It's redistribution. My skin crawled. I'd been in his passenger seat for 5 minutes, and this guy was casually confessing online banking fraud. I swallowed and asked how he got away with it. He laughed, a quick, nervous sound, then explained he used fake identities and shell corporations, siphoned small sums at a time so alerts never tripped. He said banks flagged unusual activity for large transfers, but £500 here, 1,000 there, slipped under the radar. He described the thrill of watching the balances dip, the clients none the wiser until months later when their savings were halved. My fingers curled around the strap of my backpack as he laid out the details. Forged signatures, remote access, phishing emails sent from the bank to get login credentials. He said he wrote the messages himself, using outdated templates so they'd seem authentic. Then he'd sweep in, set up automated scripts to transfer funds into accounts he controlled. He paid tech guys in Eastern Europe to clean the digital footprints. He seemed proud, like he was telling me about a weekend project that turned into a lucrative side hustle. I parked the car at a scenic overlook, heart pounding. I stared at the water and felt sick. The salt breeze smelled like freedom, but I felt trapped next to him, tasting betrayal. I turned to him and said, "You knew what you were doing was wrong." He shrugged and said justice is subjective. This system was rigged in favor of corporations, not seniors. He said he was the only one sticking it to the man. My stomach twisted as I realized he was gambling with people's life savings for a thrill, for cash, for a warped sense of righteousness. I slid out of the car, water lapping at the rocks below, and told him I needed air. He blocked the door, saying, "We'll talk this through. I need you to understand." I shook my head, voice shaky. "I need a minute." I trudged down a worn path to the rocks, heart pounding so loud I thought he could hear it. I balled my fists, thinking of the emails he'd sent, the victims behind each transaction, confused by deficits, terrified when they discovered their accounts drained. I thought of their trust, their vulnerability, the way he took advantage of them like a parasite. When I climbed back up, he was standing by the car, arms folded. I said I wanted no part of it, that I couldn't be with someone who thrived on exploiting others. His expression flickered. Anger, hurt, confusion, and he said, "You're overreacting. I've never hurt them in person. It's just money." I stared at him. Money that grandparents saved for homes, vacations, grandchildren. Money that died with them because no one understood their statements. He smiled and said, "We'd all survive however we can." I wanted to scream at him that survival at the expense of the powerless isn't survival, it's theft. I got into a taxi downtown, swiping left on my phone to block his messages. I called my friend to come pick me up. I didn't look back at the coupe as it drove off, headlights disappearing around a bend. I replayed his words in my head, redistribution, thrill, man. I felt hollow, like I'd been used. Back at my apartment, I tossed my bag on the floor and sat on the edge of my bed, mind buzzing. I searched for news of arrests, any mention of account hacks in local senior homes. I found a small article about a suspicious uptick in fraudulent withdrawals at 2 care facilities. No names mentioned. It said the bank was investigating. I printed it out and stuffed it in my drawer. I thought about going to the police, but worried they'd think I was exaggerating. I'd only heard a confession, no proof beyond his words, and that cold truth in his eyes. I changed my locks that night, called my credit union to add extra security to my accounts, set alerts for any withdrawals. Every ping from my phone alerted me, sparking anxiety. I imagined every notification was the sound of another victim's savings slipping away. I deleted the rideshare app he suggested and any trace of our time together. Over the next weeks, I kept my eyes open for news. The care homes launched an internal audit, and one of the administrators was fired for negligence. The bank froze some accounts, refunded a handful of heirs, but no grand arrests. The hacker network remained in shadows. I realized Ryan had probably vanished any digital leads, moved money offshore, covered his tracks with proxies. I tried to trust again, went on dates with guys who worked normal jobs, who paid for dinner without acting like they were making a statement. But every time someone mentioned they had a trust fund, I'd breathe out slow and look away, heart hammering. I felt twinges of guilt for fearing someone who hadn't told me his crimes. It was my own guard, wounded and weary, protecting me from his world. Months later, I got a text from an unknown number. "Hey, this is Ryan. Can we talk?" I stared at it, thumb hovering over block. I thought about calling the bank, telling them someone was taunting me. Then I thought about the seniors with empty accounts, the families left scrambling. I blocked the number. The coast was still beautiful, but now I saw it as a place where I'd almost been lured into trusting a con. No clean ending, no final reckoning. Just the bitter taste of betrayal and the reminder that when someone tells you they're vulnerable to win your sympathy, they might be the ones doing the taking. I never expected a clipboard to feel like a loaded gun, but that's exactly how I felt when Kate slid it across the table after our first dinner. We'd met on a weekend hiking trip. She was funny, easygoing, and had this way of listening that made me feel like I mattered. After 2 hours of awkward small talk, I suggested grabbing tacos at a place downtown. We picked a booth by the window and loaded up on grilled veggies and salsa that left my shirt stained. Just as I was thinking how nice it was to relax with someone new, she pulled out the clipboard and said she needed me to sign a non-disclosure agreement. I blinked at her. She tapped the NDA like it was totally normal. "It's just standard procedure," she said, voice calm as melted butter. "I work in market research for a private firm. We bring in fresh faces for pilot programs." I stared at the fine print about confidential methodologies and unauthorized disclosures. My stomach flipped. Had I agreed to tacos with a spy? I laughed, half joking, and asked if this was some prank. She smiled and said no, that policies existed for a reason, that I'd signed worse just to get a rental car. Something in her eyes, an odd gleam, made me swallow hard. I signed. The next morning, I woke up to 3 missed calls from a number I didn't recognize. My head throbbed from the buzz of too much beer and questionable salsa. I called back and heard a polite voice thanking me for my willingness to participate in the Focus Forward initiative. They said my NDA was active and that details would follow. I rubbed my temples, tried to remember what I'd signed away while Kate's laughter echoed in my mind. I chalked it up to a weird night and tried to move on. 2 days later, I got a package at my door. A sleek tablet with an encrypted login and a note reading, "Welcome aboard. Your first task starts tonight." The tablet booted into an app called Insight Link, showing the feed of live camera images from various storefronts and private residences. I tapped around and realized these were unauthorized surveillance streams, shabby camera angles, flickering night vision, people doing everyday things, folding laundry, walking dogs, making late-night snacks. The app interface showed credits depleting with each view. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. My phone buzzed. It was Kate. She texted, "Let me know when you're online. We got a demo call tonight." I flipped the tablet shut and dropped on my couch. My mind spun. Kate, the market researcher, was running a pyramid scheme disguised as crowdsourced surveillance. I dug out the NDA from my wallet, flipped through it looking for clauses about privacy. Instead, I found paragraphs about data acquisition, participant compensation based on recruitment, and a tiny footnote mentioning stakeholders may include private intelligence firms. I felt queasy. That evening, I logged into the app with a fake handle I created, random user 123. A countdown timer flickered. Demo begins in 5 minutes. The interface beeped, and a video call window popped up showing Kate's smiling face framed by bookshelves. Behind her, the bookshelf rattled as she moved, and I caught a glimpse of a ring of monitors in the corner displaying the same feeds. On the call, she went through a sales pitch. Participants earn credits by watching streams, which convert to real cash if you recruit others. She said top recruiters get VIP access to high-value targets like executives, celebrities, and political figures. I sat forward, brain buzzing. She explained how each tier paid a commission. 5% for direct recruits, 3% for second-tier recruits, and so on, stacking like a pyramid. She breezed through a slide showing an org chart with users and sub-users, each node representing someone tapping into private lives. She said compliance with the NDA meant I couldn't speak about the clients or the methods or risk legal action. My stomach churned as she smiled, promising I'd clear £1,000 in credits my first week. I muted the call, took a deep breath, and typed, "I think there's a mistake. I didn't sign up for this." I unmuted and said it aloud. Kate's face lost even that faint gleam. She tilted her head and said, "No mistake. You volunteered. Just follow the steps and you'll be fine." I felt my cheeks heat. "This is illegal." She shrugged, as if explaining a drizzle. "It's a gray area. Private properties are covered well by current laws. Besides, our lawyers cover us." She flicked through slides of terms of service, encryption safeguards, and offshore servers. I pressed exit. I spent the next hours reading everything I could find at Insight Link online. Forum threads gossiped about data leaks, canceled credit cards, extortion attempts. One post mentioned a developer who refused to recruit new users and found his flat bugged with cameras. Another warned about recruiters disappearing after a payout. I turned off my phone, locked my front door, and slept with the light on. The next morning, I texted Kate, explaining I'd resign. I typed carefully, quoting the NDA's termination clause about voluntary exit. She replied, "Resign requests go through your recruiter. We'll handle it." My blood ran cold. I called the support line on the tablet. An automated voice told me to submit a resignation form inside the app. If I failed to comply, the NDA could be enforced. I bit back a scream. I opened the app and found the resignation form buried under menus. It asked for digital signature and 2 witnesses. Internal panic made my hands shake. I realized I didn't have contacts willing to vouch for me in such a shady context. I closed the tablet and slid it under my couch cushion. A knock came at my door that afternoon. I peeked through the peephole. No one there. On the floor lay an envelope with my name. Inside was a photo of me leaving the coffee shop with Kate 2 nights ago, the NDA clipboard visible, faces blocked out. A note read, "Remember you signed. We'll be watching." I stumbled back, heart racing. They had surveillance on me too. Over the next week, I avoided home as much as I could. I stayed with friends, moved police barricades to my mind every time I heard a camera shutter click. Each time the tablet beeped with a recruitment notification, I pressed ignore. I watched as my credits ticked up to a point. Enough for a small payout, but I couldn't bring myself to cash them in. I feared that would lock me in. If I tried to convert credits to pounds, it'd demand more recruiting. It felt like quicksand. Finally, I decided to report it. I gathered screenshots of the app, the NDA, the photo thread. I walked into the police station without the tablet, phone, or clipboard. I laid out everything I had, the NDA, the demo call screenshots, the envelope photo. The officer listened, eyebrows drawn together, then told me to file a complaint online, that they'd investigate if more reports came in. I felt deflated as I left. That night, I bought a burner phone and threw my tablet into a dumpster 3 blocks away. I deleted my accounts, ditched my mountain biking group, and uninstalled every app on my phone. I changed my email, my passwords, even my walking route. In the back of my mind, I still expect Kate or her underlings to pop up on my screen, at my door, on a live feed I'll never see. I wake up and check every corner, searching for hidden lenses. There's no neat ending here. No heroic takedown, no legal victory. Just a lingering fear that signing a sheet of paper over tacos was enough to make me complicit in a global scheme of voyeurism. I learned that sometimes the most dangerous pyramids aren't built from bricks. They are built from legal jargon, hidden clauses, and the trust you didn't know you were giving away. I first met Brandon at the climbing gym on a Tuesday afternoon when the place was half empty and the walls smelled like chalk and sweat. He was belaying for a friend, muscles tense, scars crisscrossing his forearms like someone had tried to erase parts of his history. I nodded a greeting and he smiled, one of those crooked grins that makes you forgive anything. We started trading tips on handholds, and at the end of the session, he asked if I wanted to grab coffee at the cafe across the street. Over Lats the next day, he pointed to the scars and shrugged them off as some accident from his warehouse job. I didn't press. He talked about his ex and how moving on was hard, and I told him I'd been in the same spot 6 months ago. It felt natural, like two people swapping pieces of a puzzle until they clicked. I liked that he was honest about everything except those scars, which he treated like an inside joke. A week later, he invited me to a small gathering at a friend's house in the woods. I pictured a mellow bonfire and acoustic guitars, maybe someone roasting marshmallows. Instead, we drove down a dirt road and parked outside a ramshackle cabin covered in vines. Inside, a dozen people sat cross-legged on the floor, chanting softly while candles flickered. Brandon slipped beside me, whispered, "This is my group," as if he was showing off a secret club. The air smelled like incense and pine needles, and a hush fell over me. The leader was a tall woman with long hair and a velvet robe. She spoke about transformation, shedding old selves to embrace the higher truth. Everyone nodded, eyes glazed, and Brandon rose to volunteer for a demonstration. I watched as the woman moved close and traced her finger along one of his scars. He shivered and hissed, and she murmured something I couldn't hear. Then she pressed a crystal against his wrist, and he closed his eyes, head lolling back. My chest tightened. After the ceremony, Brandon asked if I wanted to join their weekend retreat. He said it would help me with my anxiety and creative block. I hesitated but agreed. I've been desperate for something to kickstart my art project. The retreat was at a remote lodge by a lake. The first night was fine. Campfire stories, stargazing pancakes at dawn. But on the second morning, the leader pulled me aside, smiling wide, and told me Brandon had a special role for me in the group. She led me to a tent where I found Brandon already unpacking. He looked nervous, hand shaking as he handed me a black binder labeled Ascension Protocol. He said it was part of a ceremony designed to deepen my connection to the group. Inside were pages of instructions, controlled fasting, guided meditations at dawn, isolation periods to purge negative influences. He blamed it on a tough love routine, said it would change my life. I looked at his eyes, wondering why he seemed terrified explaining it. That afternoon they gathered us by the lake. The leader lit a torch and called us seekers. She handed Brandon a knife with a blade so thin it glinted in the firelight. My heart pounded as she told him to mark his wand with the symbol of the phoenix, signifying rebirth. Brandon took a rag with salt water and tied it around his forearm, then pressed the blade against his skin. I watched droplets of blood bead up as he made a small slash. He didn't flinch. A murmur went through the circle of seekers. The leader blessed his scar. I staggered back, stomach nodding. Brandon met my eyes, lips trembling. He said it was nothing compared to what he'd done for the former leader, how he'd volunteered his body as proof of devotion. I realized then the scars weren't accidents at all. They were trophies from these rituals. I felt a wave of nausea imagining myself in that circled knife in hand, asked to bleed for someone's spirituality. My skin crawled. That night I heard chanting outside the lodge window. I peeked through the curtains and saw everyone in a ring, torches held high. Brandon's silhouette stood at the center, arms raised as they called his name. Then the chanting shifted and filled my chest with panic. I grabbed my phone, tried to call my roommate, but no signal. I slipped out, heart thudding, and crept across the grass toward the parking lot. Somewhere behind me a twig snapped, and I froze, thinking I'd been spotted. I ran to my car and fumbled with the keys. On the fifth try, I got the door open, then slammed inside. The engine roared as I peeled away, dust cloud kicking up behind me. I drove until the headlights carved a path through trees away from that cabin and those candles. I pulled off the road when I hit a paved highway and texted my roommate. "Need help now." She called 5 minutes later, panicking, and told me to stay where I was until she arrived. Back in the city, I tried to erase every trace of that weekend. I deleted photos, burned my notes, threw away clothes I'd worn. I blocked Brandon on every account. But the memory of his scars, the knife in his hand, and that crystal pressed at his wrist stayed with me. I saw him in my dreams, chanting, offering his body, asking me to join. My skin itched with phantom touch of salt water and candle smoke. I considered talking to the police, but I had no proof beyond the scribbled binder cover and memories I sounded crazy describing. The leaders grid was off the grid. No official address, no website, no paper trail. They used burner phones and code words. Seeker, Ascension, Phoenix. I felt powerless against a network built on secrets and scars. Now, every time I feel drawn to something new, I double check before I say yes. I research retreats and read every review, even if it means I miss out on genuine opportunities. I look at scars differently, not as accidents, but as stories someone's telling themselves. I learned that people will slice open their own wrists to prove loyalty to a stranger with a velvet robe and a crystal. And I learned that even the most charming grin can be hiding a ritual blade. I still get a knot in my stomach when I think about the charity gala Megan invited me to. We matched on a volunteer app. She claimed to spend weekends helping at a homeless shelter downtown, and I figured she was genuine. Our first few hangouts were at soup kitchens and clothing drives, and she always looked so earnest, kneeling beside people, chatting gently as she handed out blankets. I thought it was inspiring. Then she asked if I could help her with a special project at an exclusive benefit dinner for donors. My heart leaped. This was a chance to see how real fundraising worked, to meet people actually throwing money at the problem. I said yes without hesitation. That evening, I showed up at a fancy hotel ballroom, men in tuxedos, women in gowns, chandeliers glittering overhead. Megan greeted me at the entrance with a clipboard and a warm smile. She said she'd arranged for me to be her assistant, noting donor names and handing out raffle tickets. I adjusted my borrowed dress and followed her inside. The air smelled like roses and perfume. Waitstaff passed trays of tiny hors d'oeuvres, and every few feet there was a photo backdrop with the charity's logo. I felt like I'd stepped into a movie set. We circled the room, Megan introducing me to well-known business owners, lawyers, even a local celebrity chef. They were all friendly, patting her on the back, praising her commitment. I scribbled notes on the clipboard. Mr. Harrison promised £10,000. Ms. Chan, looking for auction items. Dr. Iverson, interested in sponsorship. I was thrilled to be part of it. Then Megan asked me to take photos on her phone of each guest at their table. Just candid snaps, she said, for the newsletter. I clicked away, thinking it was normal PR stuff. About an hour in, the auction began. Phones buzzed with bids. Paddles rose and fell. The crowd buzzed. I noticed Megan slipping away between tables, ducking into a corner with her phone pressed to her ear. I followed quietly, heart thudding, and saw her talking low into the mic, her eyes scanning the room. She snapped photos of two men leaning in close, one whispering something that made the other's face twist in shock. Then she took another picture of a woman sipping champagne with a half smile, looking over her shoulder as if someone just said something awkward. Back in the ballroom, under the chandelier glare, Megan slipped me a glance. She mouthed, "Watch." I did, and saw her approach one of the donors, a distinguished older man who just donated a hefty sum. He stepped aside with her, and I heard her low voice. "Our images can stay private if we secure your full contribution today." His eyes widened. He reached into his suit pocket, pulled out a check, and passed it to her. She tucked it away and gave him a sympathetic nod, as if she just helped him avoid embarrassment. A sharp twist in my gut. This was blackmail, not charity. I backed away, bumping into a waiter, and cupped my mouth to stifle a gasp. Megan moved on, extracting more secret donations. She knew exactly what button to press. Everyone here had something to hide, something they didn't want leaked to the press or public. I thought of the homeless shelter, of all those people she'd said she cared about. This was how she'd funded her work, by trapping rich patrons in a game of shame. I slipped out onto the balcony, the cold night air hitting me. The city lights glittered below. I stared at my phone, wondering if I should capture proof. Part of me wanted to run back inside and shout, but I felt paralyzed. Eventually, I slipped back in, weaving through tables until I caught Megan's eye. She was posing with a politician, with smiles so perfect they looked fake. I tapped her arm and said I needed to go get some fresh air. She paused, eyes narrowing, but let me slip past. Outside on the sidewalk, I called my friend Sarah, not the same Sarah you thought of, a different one, and whispered everything. She told me to call the police, but I hesitated. These were powerful people, law firms, sponsors. Would they believe me? Would I become the scapegoat? My heart pounded as I realized I'd been complicit just by being here, snapping photos for her newsletter. I hung up, head spinning and paced under a street lamp. Back inside, the room had emptied. The band was packing up, waitstaff stacking chairs. I found Megan signing receipts behind a desk. She looked up, eyes cold. "Did you see anything you shouldn't?" she asked, voice soft but hard as stone. My mouth went dry. I knew I couldn't answer. I said, "I think I need to go." She handed me a printed envelope, my photos from the evening. I opened it and saw pictures of me leaning over a railing, phone in hand, face lit by screen. She watched me flick through them, then said, "These stay private, right? I wouldn't want anything getting out." I closed it and handed it back without a word. I walked up to a quiet taxi rank and hailed a cab. The driver asked if I was okay, and all I could do was nod and stare out the window. The city scenery blurred as I tried to process. The next morning, I woke up with a headache and guilt pressing on my chest. I deleted the charity app, blocked Megan's number, changed my email. I got calls from work asking why I'd skipped a shift. My voice sounded hollow when I explained I wasn't feeling well. That afternoon, I saw a headline about a scandal, wealthy donors being blackmailed by a volunteer ring. They mentioned photos leaked to tabloids, anonymous tips, suspected fundraiser misconduct. I stared at the article, stunned. They hadn't named names, but the modus operandi was the same. Megan's operation had been exposed, but would they trace it back to her? Would I be dragged in as an accomplice, my name caught in the gossip vortex? I lay on my couch, phone out of reach, thinking about those homeless shelters. I wondered if their funds would vanish now that donors were burned. I felt sick at the thought that her victim line extended beyond the rich. Eviction refugees, people sleeping on benches, all marginalized in a broken system. Yet she'd weaponize the wealthy to feed her cause. I realized I might have been better off ignoring her from the start. Days later, I got a call from an unknown number. I let it ring. I thought about forwarding the evidence I'd secretly collected, but the fear glinted sharp. A photo of me smiling at a stranger could be mine for leverage. I decided to leave it be. I closed my eyes and turned off my phone. I had no neat resolution, just the memory of chandeliers, champagne flutes, and one woman's cruel collection of secrets hidden behind a volunteer badge. I still laugh when I think about how innocent it sounded when Tyler told me he was on a top secret government assignment and needed a safe house for meetings. It was junior year, right around midterms, and I was drowning in chem notes when he offered to let me use his spare room to study in peace. He said his parents were out of town, dealing with classified work, so the house was empty and perfect for late night sessions. I thought it was cool, like something out of a spy movie, and grabbed my textbooks, ready for caffeine-fueled cram sessions. The house was on a quiet street lined with maples, the kind with porch swings and wind chimes that creaked in the breeze. Tyler met me at the door wearing a hoodie and sunglasses, even though it was twilight. He ushered me inside and winked, saying, "Don't tell anyone I'm here." I thought he was messing around. The living room smelled like old carpet and burnt popcorn, and there was a roll-top desk tucked in the corner. He told me the basement was where the really sensitive stuff stayed, but we could keep all our study materials upstairs. I dumped my backpack on his guest bed and pulled out my laptop. Over the next few days, Tyler was the perfect host. He made us instant noodles at odd hours, had every textbook I could imagine, and even printed out practice tests for me. He had this tiny whiteboard above his desk where he'd scribble code names and diagrams that looked like mission plans. Whenever I asked what they meant, he'd smile and say, "Just prep work." I didn't think he was lying. It was just fun banter, like he was running some new think tank and I was his research assistant. Then one night, I spied a flicker of red light under the basement door as I was leaving. I paused and heard muffled voices, deep, serious tones, and a weird crackle like a radio transmission. Curiosity got the better of me. I crept back upstairs, grabbed a flashlight from his kitchen drawer, and tiptoed to the stairs. The wood groaned underfoot, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. I clicked on the flashlight and edged down into the basement. The room was lit by pale bulbs dangling from the ceiling. Racks of servers hummed in the corner, their fans kicking out a breeze that smelled like metal and electricity. Monitors lined a desk, each showing social media feeds, Instagram stories, Facebook check-ins, photos of people at parties in the city. Some screens displayed live maps with little pins blinking on the homes of targets. I froze when I saw a profile pop up with my neighbor's face and a tag reading _puri_RIT. My heart pounded so loud I thought they'd hear me. I stepped backward and bumped into a rolling chair, which spun across the floor with a harsh squeak. A voice behind me said, "Glad you made it down here." I swallowed and turned. Tyler leaned against the desk, arms crossed, that crooked grin plastered on his face. He told me this was his weekend hack, an underground espionage ring he built with college dropouts and disillusioned tech bros. They sold private intel on socialites, snippets of conversations, weekend plans, even bedroom layouts, to wealthy clients who paid top dollar for gossip. He said it was victimless, just harmless data sharing. I pressed my lips together and said, "Tyler, that's illegal." He chuckled and said governments have whole divisions doing it. He just cut out the red tape. He pointed to a screen showing a feed of a model's Instagram live. "See that?" he said. "I get paid every time someone downloads this feed. It's a subscription model. You want it." My stomach turned. I realized those late-night study sessions were building my cover. He'd made me the perfect alibi, a clueless undergrad with permission to be in the house. I backed toward the stairs and asked why he lied about government work. He shrugged, made me sound legit. He said his parents' real jobs were in finance, too boring for his stories. He told me he'd been up too late selling so much intel that he needed a place to crash people's trust without raising suspicion. I felt sick imagining my face in his logs. Another asset. I scrambled up the stairs and yanked the light switch, but the basement bulb stayed on. He called after me, "Don't tell the professor you're ditching our study sessions." I didn't reply. I fled to the front door and slammed it behind me. The porch light flickered just as a text pinged on my phone. "Miss you already," from Tyler. My hands shook as I unlocked my bike and pedaled off into the night. That week, I barely slept. Every time my phone buzzed, I braced for a location update or a feed link. I deleted all the photos he'd sent me, snapshots of campus meetups, library sessions, even the group chat where he gave me on mission briefs. I blocked his number and even skipped a few classes to avoid running into him. I thought about going to the police, but realized I had no proof, no screenshots of his desktop, no recordings of his voice in that basement. And if I tried to gather evidence, I'd have to go back there, risk getting caught in his web. A month later, there was a small article in the local paper about a data breach. They mentioned that a private ring had been selling personal info on several high-profile socialites. No names were given. I recognized the operation's hallmarks: subscription tiers, live feeds, targeted gossip. They said an anonymous informant helped. My chest tightened. I hoped it was me, but I knew they probably exposed a minor node, a small offshore server, not the ringleader storing everything in a suburban basement. That Sunday, I saw Tyler riding past campus on his bike, headphones in, looking more relaxed than ever. He saw me, gave a quick nod, then turned onto Campus Street and disappeared. I let out breath I didn't know I'd been holding. I wondered if he bulleted the company under pressure, vanished his ring, or just renamed it and started over. I never confronted him. I stuck to online classes for the rest of the semester, trading in-person meetups for Zoom. Every time I log in, I make sure my background blur is on. I change passwords obsessively and refuse to share my study locations with anyone. The basement hack still gives me nightmares, servers humming, red map pins blinking, my neighbor's face as a target. And I keep asking myself if I made the right call by running instead of fighting back. There's no neat victory here, just the knowledge that someone you think you know can pull you into something darker than you ever imagined. I didn't think twice when Michael suggested we meet in his parents' basement. He said it was quieter than a coffee shop and way safer than other places he knew. I figured he just wanted privacy, maybe a chill spot to talk. I'd only known him a few weeks after matching on a local volunteer app. We bonded over building tiny houses for charity and random photography walks downtown. He seemed reliable, steady, always texting me good morning, asking about my day. Meeting at home felt intimate in a harmless way, like we were moving past small talk and into something more personal. The stairs leading down smelled like aged wood and old carpet, a faint scent of mothballs mixed with must. The basement door creaked when he opened it, and I stepped inside, blinking against the dim warmth. The walls were lined with bookshelves and old crates, and a couch so lumpy it looked like it had survived a college dorm purge. He pointed to a couple of stools beside a low table cluttered with video game controllers and cardboard models of model airplanes. A single lamp cast a soft glow, enough to read but not enough to see every corner. I handed him a pack of soda cans and he said thanks, rubbing his palms together. He wore a hoodie, jeans, and sneakers, nothing flashy. He motioned for me to sit and shrugged when I asked why down here. He said his parents were on a strict cleaning schedule and didn't want to mess upstairs. It sounded plausible. I didn't want to overthink it. We settled into a comfortable silence as we popped open sodas, and he asked how my week had been. We talked about the garden project I was working on, the fundraiser he was planning. He had neat folders with notes and even a small whiteboard with sketches of birdhouse designs. Everything felt organized, thoughtful. He offered me a granola bar and leaned back. The cushions groaned under him. That's when I noticed the filing cabinet tucked in the corner, half hidden behind a stack of plastic bins. It looked out of place among the dusty models like a relic from some dull office job. Out of curiosity, I leaned forward and ran a finger over the label on one drawer. Personal. I raised an eyebrow, but Michael just said, "Oh, yeah, sorry. It's got my work stuff. My parents kept it from my old apartment." He didn't sound worried, more casual than anything. I nodded, but the label stuck in my head as he popped open the drawer. He pulled out a few folders, then paused as if he'd forgotten something and returned them inside. A metal latch clicked shut. He looked at me and smiled, changing the subject to a funny voicemail he'd gotten from his landlord. Relief washed over me. I almost breached some private boundary. We laughed, the tension easing as he described a landlord who couldn't pronounce his name. We spent the next hour gaming, trading controllers, laughing at each other's terrible skills. It felt normal, like hanging out with any friend. Then Michael said he needed to grab something quick from the drawer, asked if I minded. I thought, sure, no problem. I was curious but didn't want to seem invasive. He stood, walked over, and unlocked the drawer with a key he pulled from his pocket. I watched the top folder peek out, labeled IDs and records. Something fell off, but I forced myself to ignore it. He pulled up 2 laminated cards, handed them to me without looking up. They clacked against my palm as I unfolded them. My eyes blinked twice. One card was his driver's license, but the photo looked off. Sharp jawline, same hair, the name was different. The second was a state ID with a different alias, different birthday, same face. My palms got sweaty. The basement felt suddenly too warm. I stared at the cards, hesitant to hand them back. Michael turned and said, "Check those, pretty sweet, right? Got them cheap through a guy I know." He sounded proud, like he was showing off a collector's item. I flipped through the IDs again, heart racing. Then I noticed a third card peeking out under the folder flap. I slid it free. It was an arrest warrant, faded edges, official seal. The photo matched him exactly. Wanted for fraud in 3 states. Wire fraud, identity theft, grand larceny. My mouth went dry. He leaned against the table, arms crossed, watching me. He said, "I didn't think it'd be an issue since I'm not using them to scan my dates." His tone was casual, like we were discussing weather. I felt my vision blur. Somewhere behind his calm face I saw danger flicker. I stammered out a question. Why here? Why me? He shrugged, as if choosing a basement and a volunteer was a logical choice. He said, "You're smart, I like that. No one else around here asks questions, and these IDs help me keep a low profile. I just need to lay low for a while, get some cash flowing, then move on." I swallowed, trying to steady my breathing. Cash flowing, what did that mean? I realized I'd been naive, trusting this person who slipped underground money through fake identities. He must have been taking money from the garden fundraiser donations, from people he met through volunteer events. My mind raced. How many others had he gotten close to? How many people were out thousands because of him? I felt sick. I wanted to run up the stairs, but thought about the lock on the door, the key he still held. I was trapped in his world for a moment. He said, I'm not a monster. I just need some time. Promise I'll make it right once I leave town. Just don't leave. I like your company. I held the cards tight, fear and anger warping together. Part of me wanted to shatter them against the table, tear them in half. Another part wanted to sit down and pretend nothing happened. My head pounded as I realized this was a crossroads. Leave and risk him following me, or stay and become part of his cover. The basement felt like a prison. I took a breath. 1, 2, 3. I met his eyes and said, I have to go. My voice was low flat. He glanced at the IDs in my hand, then back at me. He said nothing, just watched. I placed the cards on the table and turned to leave. The stairs out of the basement felt impossibly steep, each step echoing as I climbed. I expected him behind me, maybe grabbing my backpack, but the door stayed open. I reached the top, half hoped the door would lock behind me. It didn't. Outside, fresh air hit me like a wake-up call. The evening breeze smelled like rain on hot pavement. I texted a friend to pick me up, my hands still trembling around the phone. I didn't look back at the porch light as I walked away. That night, I slept on my friend's couch, half listening to the hum of her city apartment. I called the police the next morning, told them everything I saw. They took my statement but said they'd need more evidence. Michael's case files would be buried in paperwork. I washed my clothes, threw away the granola bar wrapper. I changed passwords, deactivated my volunteer account. I sat with my phone off, listening to the ceiling fan. Days later, the campus paper ran a blurb about a suspected identity thief seen near volunteer events. No names mentioned. I read it with sick fascination. Had he been seen in the lobby? Were they close to catching him? I thought about confronting him at the next meeting, but I knew better. He had those IDs, the network, the lies ready. He could vanish with a weekend's notice. Now, whenever someone suggests meeting at home, I say no. If they insist, I ask too many questions. Why the basement? Why the old candles? Why the locked drawer? It's not paranoia, it's survival. I still think about those laminated cards and the way he held the key. I still feel the weight of that arrest warrant in my hand. There's no neat ending, no clear justice. Just the memory of realizing that someone you trust can have a secret life you'd never imagined, down to the last detail hidden in a dusty basement drawer. I still cringe when I think about that first confession over lukewarm coffee in the corner booth of our favorite cafe. Aaron leaned in and said, almost whispering, I have kleptomania. He looked half relieved, half ashamed, like unloading a secret I was supposed to fix. I laughed it off. Blaming impulses on a psychological quirk sounded almost romantic, like some tortured artist trope. He swore it wasn't a joke. He had urges he couldn't control, that sometimes he borrowed small things just to calm the tension in his chest. I patted his hand and said it was fine, that everyone had quirks, and I didn't mind. That was the first mistake. Over the next few weeks, our dates were a mix of adventure and awkward honesty. We went to bookstores, music shows, even a pottery class where he nearly knocked over a rack of mugs as we molded clay. Each time he begged me not to tell anyone, explaining that the thefts were minor, chapters of books, small trinkets, novelty keychains. He said he always planned to return them but never got the chance, and even if he did, the risk of being caught was too thrilling to resist. I thought I understood that this was part of his charm, this edgy unpredictability. I didn't see where it would lead. Then the wedding gift arrived. My cousin Sophie had tied me and my partner to this date by offering tickets to a destination wedding in Iceland. Aaron and I took the plunge, literally saw glaciers and stayed in a guest house warmed by hot springs. There among the snow and midnight sun, I noticed my watch was missing. I'd worn the silver band every day for years. It wasn't a family heirloom, just something I treasured. I asked him if I'd lost it in the geothermal pools. He offered to help me retrace my steps, but his eyes flickered when I mentioned the watch's description. He kept glancing at my wrist, where it no longer was. That evening, after everyone else had gone to sleep, he said he needed air and slipped out. I followed at a distance and found him crouched by the garbage bins behind the guest house. He rifled through a plastic bag and pulled out my watch, its face scratched. I felt a punch in my gut. He looked up, half embarrassed, half exhilarated, and said, I couldn't help it. They called to me. I said nothing as he wiped it with his sleeve and handed it back. A lump formed in my throat as I realized his kleptomania wasn't harmless quirks. It was targeting me. Back in town, I tried to pretend nothing happened, but every time I looked at my wrist, I saw the scratch he'd left. When we got home, I confronted him gently, wondering if he felt regret. He shrugged and said, "It's yours again, right? I'll pay you back." I felt a wave of anger. I told him it wasn't about the money, it was a betrayal. He said he needed help, that he'd get counseling. I believed him at least for a moment. I told him I'd support him. That was mistake number 2. Months passed and the stories piled up. My roommate's headphones vanished after Aaron stayed over. A neighbor's bike lock went missing after he borrowed my pump. I found my favorite coffee mug in his bag, cracked, chipped, but unmistakably mine. Each time I confronted him, he'd grit his teeth and promise it wouldn't happen again. He was caught in a cycle, he said, driven by impulses he didn't fully understand. I felt sorry for him until I realized he was gaming the sympathy. One evening, I was cleaning out his pockets after laundry and found receipts for online sales. I traced the links and discovered a shifty seller account on a resale marketplace. The listings were items I described in passing: my grandmother's brooch, the vintage camera I'd once rented for a project, even the handmade scarf my aunt knitted. They were labeled as unwanted gifts or estate sale finds. The prices seemed reasonable, just enough to avoid raising suspicion. I stared at the screen, stomach twisting, as I clicked each listing and saw my own stuff. He was fencing my belongings under the guise of clearing clutter. My blood ran cold. I felt used and humiliated. I snapped a screenshot and confronted him that night when he came home. He didn't deny it. He said the market was easy. People buy anything with a story, and he was good at crafting those stories. He talked about cleaning houses like an entrepreneur talking about product sourcing. He made a few £100s selling my things. He bragged enough to cover his therapy. I nearly vomited. I told him I couldn't do this anymore. He reached toward me, voice pleading, promising to deactivate the seller account, return everything, start fresh. I froze, realizing the returned items would likely be damaged or incomplete. I realized the only way to protect my things was to end it. The next morning, I packed a bag with the essentials, clothes, laptop, 2 precious books, and slipped out before he woke. He texted me all day apologizing, begging for another chance. I ignored him. I stayed with a friend, too anxious to face my empty apartment. I changed the locks the next day and hired a locksmith to install a smart home security system. I changed my passwords everywhere, closed my seller account too. But the violated feeling lingered, like someone had rummaged through my life and sold the pieces. Every gift I'd given him in good faith, every moment of trust, felt like a transaction. Weeks later, I saw a news post about a ring of petty thieves selling stolen goods online. They mentioned local victims, but the details were vague. I wondered if Aaron was part of something bigger or if he'd simply copied my pattern later. The thought that he might move on to others terrified me. I felt a surge of guilt, too. What if counseling would have helped him? What if I'd been too cruel? But I knew you can't help someone who profits off your life. Months after I moved on, a small package arrived at my door. No sender information, no return address. Inside was a neatly wrapped box and a note. I tried to make it right. I opened it and found my scarred watch, its face buffed to a dull shine, along with a tangled scarf I'd barely recognized. The knot in my stomach tightened as I saw the engraving he'd added. Sorry. I understood the gesture, but felt a flush of anger more than relief. I threw the items into a drawer, unable to look at them. Now, whenever someone hints at personal struggles to earn my sympathy, I hesitate. I learned the hard way that vulnerability can be a weapon, that professed confessions can be calculated schemes. People say love is about accepting flaws, but some flaws, that compulsive need to take what isn't yours, aren't meant to be forgiven. I learned the idea that trust has no price. Mine cost me my possessions and nearly my peace of mind, and I still can't wear that watch without choking on memories of betrayal. I'll never forget the day Natalie first brought up adoption like it was the most natural next step for us. We were lounging on my sagging couch, eating takeout curry and binge-watching crime documentaries when she paused the show and said, "I've been thinking. I really want to adopt a kid." Her eyes were wide with excitement, like she'd just spotted a rare bird outside my window. I laughed, thinking it was a joke. She'd teased me all week with stories about wanting a bigger family someday, but she nodded dead serious. Over the next month, adoption became our obsessive weekend project. Nably printed out brochures from overseas agencies, bookmarked support groups for adoptees, and even made a vision board plastered with baby photos and snippets of heartfelt letters from hopeful parents. I admit I got swept up in it. We talked about names, nursery color schemes, the schools we'd research. I pictured lullabies and first steps. It felt like the most loving thing we could do together. Then things got weird. I started noticing little inconsistencies whenever we talked about paperwork. She told me she'd send our financial documents and background checks to the agency, but never showed me any confirmation emails or reference numbers. When I asked to see our home inspection checklist, something I'd drafted for us, she said it was just file clutter and scribbled down the key points on a post-it instead. I blamed my own impatience. Adoption, I told myself, was a long, messy process. Things took a darker turn when she invited me to meet some friends at a community center for displaced families. We sat in a circle of folding chairs while her friend Sarah shared a sob story about a single mother forced to give up custody because she lost her ID after fleeing an abusive partner. My chest ached. I offered to help however I could, donate clothes, help file forms. After the meeting, Nayli pulled me aside, her voice low, and said, "I've been thinking, maybe we could fast-track our application by swapping identities." I blinked. She explained that Sarah's case was sympathetic enough to qualify her for priority adoption status, but Sarah had no stable address or documentation. Nayli said she could forge a fresh identity for Sarah, use her own birth certificate, tweak my driver's license, and slip them into the system under new names. My head spun. I stammered that it was illegal, that we were skirting child welfare laws, but Nayli was enthusiastic, pacing the hallway like a student presenting a killer thesis. She said no one would ever notice. The system was overloaded, understaffed, always looking for good PR stories. She'd done hours of research, found a contact in a printing shop willing to mint birth certificates, and had a friend who could hack the agency's database to insert the new records. All we had to do was provide fingerprints and a little money. I froze. The room smelled like stale coffee and anticipation. She gripped my hand and said, "Think of the kid, safe, loved, a home with us. Isn't that worth bending the rules?" I felt guilty for even hesitating. We left the center and went straight to her laptop. She typed furiously, "Template birth certificate, forged ID samples, agency login vulnerabilities." Screens flashed with forged forms and login screens. My heart pounded in my ears. She asked if I'd mind scanning my passport photo so she could superimpose it on Sarah's documents. I told her no. She pleaded. I said definitively no. For days, tension crackled between us. Nably backed off talk of identity swaps, but resumed pushing adoption lore, webinars, foster parenting pamphlets, emotional profiles of kids in need. I thought she'd drop the scheme, but then I noticed our names in a Google alert for a newly registered charity. Family First Homes. It listed us as lead sponsors and claimed we'd already approved a pending adoption for a child from Eastern Europe. I clicked through and found a placeholder profile for a boy with a hand-drawn picture and a note that said, "Needs loving family as soon as." I confronted her, voice shaking. She insisted it was a placeholder, just a way to hold a spot. She said she'd called the agency and they'd promised to expedite our case once paperwork was complete. I asked for the agency contact, the case number, any proof. She hemmed and hawed, then said she'd lost the email. My stomach knotted as I realized she'd rolled us into something irreversible. That night, I watched her sleeping on the narrow sofa next to me. Her breathing was steady, oblivious. I got up and scrolled through her browsing history on my phone, archive pages for ID forging workshops, message threads with her helpful hacker, shipping labels for blank birth certificates. My mind whirled with betrayal. This wasn't love. It was manipulation. I left her sleeping with a note on the coffee table. "We need to talk." She found me in the kitchen, eyes wide but not surprised. She said she'd explain everything, but I cut her off. I told her we were done, that this wasn't the partnership I signed up for. She pleaded, said I was abandoning the child, said I'd break her heart and Sarah's. She brought up every memory, every vision board, every dream, but I held firm. The next day I moved out, packing my things into trash bags before she woke. She sat on the front steps, sobbing, telling me we could fix it, we could undo the registrations, we could follow the legal route. I walked away. She called after me, voice cracking like glass, but I didn't stop. Weeks later, I found a thick envelope slipped under my new apartment door. Inside were pristine copies of my forged passport, driver's license, and a birth certificate with my photo and Sarah's name. Also a letter. In case you change your mind, child needs you. I stuffed the papers into a drawer and burned them. I never signed anything. I never contacted the agency. Now, whenever I see a safe home ad or a happy family adoption post, I switch past it. I imagine the weight of someone else's identity stamped on my own documents. I've learned that love can warp into obsession, that when someone promises you a future together, it might be building it on lies and stolen names. And I still hear Natalie's voice in my head, bending the rules for a good cause. I know now some lines, once crossed, can never be uncrossed, especially when a vulnerable child is in the middle. I thought Ethan's obsession with true crime podcast was just a quirky hobby until I found the envelope of photos on my doorstep. He'd always enthused about the latest case, detailing crime scenes, timelines, suspect profiles. So when he suggested we meet at my apartment to review a podcast episode, I didn't suspect a thing. He claimed he wanted to get my take on witness psychology. I handed him a glass of iced tea and we sat on the couch, speakers low, while he fired up his laptop. The episode was about a burglary ring that had terrorized my neighborhood 6 months ago, cases I'd read about in passing but never thought much of. Ethan paused at every detail, pointing out inconsistencies in the suspect's alibis, theorizing out motive. He asked what I'd do if I were the detective. I offered a guess or two. He nodded, scribbling notes on a legal pad, eyes bright in the bluish glow of the screen. It was fun, like playing armchair detective with someone who actually listened. I had no idea it was a setup. Later that night, I tossed and turned, replaying details of the burglary. The smashed window at my next-door neighbor's house, the neighbor's terrified call at 3 a.m., the stolen heirloom necklace that was never recovered. I shrugged it off the next morning. Ethan loved this stuff, that's all. Then I got the envelope. Inside were 4 photos printed on glossy paper. A living room taken through a crack in the blinds, my bedroom doorway. A close-up of my calendar marked with my dog walker's visits. And a final shot of my laptop open on Ethan's true crime notes. My breath caught. I flipped through them, my hands trembling. Each photo had a date and timestamp. The very day we met, the very hour. I felt violated, exposed in my most private spaces. I called Ethan, phone shaking. He answered cheerfully and asked if I'd gotten his resource package. My voice cracked as I demanded to know why he had these photos. He asked me to calm down, said he'd explain when he got over. I accused him of stalking me. He sighed like I had misunderstood something obvious and said he'd collected data on potential breaks in the case and that observing real targets gave him unique insight. I slammed the phone down. I spent the afternoon pacing, imagining him outside my windows, listening at my door. I called my dog Walker and asked her to delay her visit. I unplugged my laptop from the Wi-Fi and deleted the notes he'd sent. My phone buzzed. Ethan texting, "We need to talk." I ignored it. My heart raced every time my front door creaked or a car slowed outside. That evening, I saw him standing on the sidewalk across the street, jacket collar up, chin tucked. He gave me a small wave through the glass, my gut twisted. I didn't recognize him as the sweet-toned true crime fan anymore, but as someone treating my life like content. I wished I'd never let him into my home. I called campus security and reported unsolicited surveillance photos. They warned me to keep my doors locked and to document any further harassment. I felt petty calling it harassment, but my privacy felt shredded. I called the police non-emergency line to ask if taking photos through blinds was a crime. The officer said it could be illegal if I pressed charges, but that they'd need proof of intent. My proof was glossy prints with timestamps, but I worried it wouldn't be enough. My phone buzzed again. This time a photo of me in the shower, steam blurring the edges, taken from the window above the sink. I dropped the phone. My blood ran cold. I'd installed privacy film long ago, but had forgotten to replace it after cleaning. He'd taken advantage of every blind spot. I packed an overnight bag and booked a hotel room for the weekend. I texted a friend to pick up my mail and feed the cat. I left my apartment dark, curtains closed tight. I watched the door handle as I left, expecting him to slip in behind me, but it stayed still. I didn't look back. At the hotel lobby, I begged the clerk for a room on the top floor, away from sightlines. I slept with the chain lock on, headphones in, white noise playing. Despite that, I dreamed he was in the next bed critiquing my sleep patterns. I woke gasping. The next morning, I turned on the news and saw a segment about a true crime blogger who'd been arrested for invasion of privacy and stalking. They showed a man's face, too dark to identify, and mentioned he targeted 10 individuals in a local crime's circle of influence. My pulse spiked. I called the number at the end of the segment and left a tip. Someone had photos of me taken without consent. They said they'd look into it. That afternoon, I got a text from Ethan's number. I can't stop. This is fascinating. The real-life story is of best content. It was chilling in its casualness. I replied, "Get help. Stay away from me." No response. I asked a locksmith to install a second deadbolt and reinforce my windows. I bought noise-detecting door alarms. I changed my phone number. I told my neighbors to report anyone lurking around. But the unease stayed. I avoided walking alone, ducked into coffee shops with frosted glass, and carried a portable charger so I could keep my phone on at all times. Days later, I got an envelope addressed in Ethan's handwriting. Last chance. Inside was a memory stick and a note. This has everything. On the stick was a folder named My Life, containing all the photos organized by date, plus audio clips of me talking to friends on the couch, video of me typing passwords. The final file was labeled Next, a video titled Bathroom Break. My hands shook as I watched a doorway shot that ended where the shower would be. I closed my laptop, nausea washing over me. I realized the only way out was public exposure. I uploaded a statement to social media, no names, just a warning about obsessive true crime fans crossing lines. I shared the photos, the audio, the video. I contacted the news station that did the blogger report and sent them an anonymous tip. Within hours, the story took off online. People recognized the envelope handwriting as the bloggers on his forum posts. They traced the digital footprints back to his domain. He was arrested again, stronger charges this time. Felony stalking, invasion of privacy, distribution of illicit recordings. I still sleep with the door chain on, but I feel safer now. The hotel nights stopped once I moved back in. I changed my blinds for opaque ones. I have a small camera by the door that alerts me to motion. I still listen to true crime podcasts, just not the ones with obsessive hosts. And I never, ever let someone record me without knowing exactly how they'll use it. Losing trust in Ethan was painful, but it taught me that real life isn't content to be consumed. Sometimes the obsession turns on you. I still feel my chest tighten thinking about the night Hannah first asked for my Instagram password. We'd been dating a few weeks, meeting up after school at the old arcade or grabbing milkshakes at the diner on Main Street. One evening we were sprawled on my bed, phones in hand, scrolling through our feeds and laughing at old memes, when she looked up and said, "Trust is everything. I want your password." I blinked. She laid her phone on the comforter, unlocked, and slid it closer. We share everything, right? No secrets. It sounded romantic, like we were building an unbreakable bond, so I hesitated for a heartbeat, then typed it in. Within minutes, she was scrolling through my messages, eyes narrowing at every comment from friends. She laughed at some jokes I'd sent to my best friend, then paused on a screenshot I'd shared with my cousin. She asked why I'd sent it, and I stammered that it was private. She looked hurt and said, "If you loved me, you wouldn't hide anything." I felt guilty, but I kept watching as she thumbed through my tagged photos, my saved posts, my DMs. It felt too intimate to be normal. Over the next few days, sharing passwords became our ritual. Each morning she'd tap in mine while I did the same on hers. We compared notifications, who liked our selfies, who commented on our posts. If I got a new follower, she'd squint at the profile, judge their feed. If she liked a picture I posted, I felt a little rush, like I had earned a gold star. It was sweet at first, but soon it felt more like an audit. Privacy evaporated. One afternoon, she asked to see my Snapchat. But when I handed her my phone, she just stared at my friend list and said, "Why are you friends with Mark? Is he texting you?" Mark was a classmate I had known since grade school, someone I complained to about tests, and who sometimes borrowed my notes. I said it was nothing, that he was just helping me prep for the physics quiz. She frowned and closed the app. Later that day, she messaged him from her own phone. "Is there something going on between you two?" Panic shot through me when I saw the message. Mark replied with confusion, saying we were just study buddies. I texted Hannah to delete the conversation, but she refused, telling me he needed to answer me directly. That night, I lay awake imagining Mark forced into awkward explanations. I felt ashamed for dragging an innocent friend into our drama. I blocked Hannah from logging into my account again, changed my password, and set it to two-factor. The next morning, she stormed over, rang my doorbell, eyes blazing. She tried logging in and got locked out. She accused me of betrayal, saying I'd violated our pact. I told her I needed boundaries. She shouted that boundaries meant secrets, that secrets meant lies. I slammed the door. Over the next week, I avoided her calls and texts, but every so often she'd show up at school, corner me by my locker, and demand my password again. She said if I didn't trust her enough to share, I wasn't serious about us. Teachers noticed the tension. My friends urged me to break up, but I felt guilty, like I was the one failing a relationship test. Hannah started posting on her own stories, when you can't even trust each other online, with a photo of a broken heart emoji. My phone buzzed with classmates asking what happened. It felt like public shaming. One evening, she slid into my DMs with a new demand. "I need your Twitter and email too." No half measures. I stared at the message, phone trembling. I realized she wasn't interested in trust. She was hunting for control. I texted back, "This isn't healthy," and blocked her across everything. She reacted by posting screenshots of my DMs where I'd vented about her password demands, adding captions like, "See what he thinks of me." Suddenly, my private complaints were public. Comments rolled in. Some took her side, calling me a cheater for hiding emails. Others called her crazy. I felt naked. I didn't sleep that night. I deleted my social media deactivated accounts and emailed support to remove her screenshots. I thought I could escape by erasing my digital footprint. But as I lay in bed, my phone dinged with a delivery notification. A package had arrived for me. I hadn't ordered anything. My doorbell rang and I found a plain box on the porch. Inside was my old phone, cracked screen, wallpaper set to a sunset we'd watched together, and a note, "You can't hide from me." No signature. My hands shook as I held the phone. I took a deep breath, called my mom to come get me. I left the box on my porch for my dad to find. At his grocery store job, I sat in the back office and tried to calm down. I realized this had gone beyond teenage drama. Someone who claimed to love me was stalking my accounts, posting my private words, even sending me back my broken phone. I felt violated in a way I couldn't describe. The next day, I went to campus security and filed a harassment report. They told me to keep records of everything and to ignore her posts. They offered to walk me to class between periods. It felt embarrassing, like I was a witness in my own breakup. But I agreed because I didn't trust myself alone anymore. Over the following weeks, Hannah's posts faded, but the aftermath lingered. I'd see a viral screenshot of me complaining about her and cringe. I avoided making new online friends, skeptical of anyone asking for passwords or just to prove trust. I learned to value privacy as a boundary, not a betrayal. I started seeing a counselor about the anxiety it caused me. I changed my locks and my email address. Every time I see someone post, "What's your password?" as a joke, my heart skips a beat. There's no neat ending where I learn a lesson and move on. Sometimes I still wake up in a cold sweat, phone buzzing with a missed call from an unknown number. I have to remind myself I'm safe now, that trust doesn't mean sharing every secret, and that a relationship built on control isn't worth keeping. I realize that true trust lets you keep parts of yourself just for you, and that some secrets are meant to stay secret. I never expected a casual comment about an ex to turn into a full-blown cyber stalker saga, but that's exactly how things went with Lucas. We met at a summer art program. We sketching in the courtyard, and fiddling with his phone in the shade. He struck up a conversation about Van Gogh, and I thought he was just another hip art nerd. A few weeks in, over lukewarm college cafeteria pizza, he mentioned his ex had been really intense about tracking him online. I laughed it off and said at least he dodged a bullet. He nodded. There was a flicker in his eye I didn't catch. After the program ended, Lucas and I started hanging out. We hit indie shows downtown, wander thrift shops, binge horror movies until midnight. He seemed laid back, the kind of guy who wore a faded flannel and never checked his watch. One night, after a late screening, he asked for my address. He said he wanted to mail me some prints of my sketches. I gave it to him without thinking. I trust people too easily. A few days later, I got a package. 3 glossy reproductions of my courtyard sketches. The paper was nice, thick matte stock, and he'd handwritten notes on each. Great line work, love your shadow work. Can't wait to see more. I hung them in my room and sent him a thank you text. He replied with a thumbs up emoji and happy to help. Then the weird stuff started. Late at night, my phone buzzed with push notifications from a running app I didn't have. I opened it and saw my exact route home from campus. Pinpointed on a map, time-stamped. My heart thumped. I didn't sign up, I thought. I deleted the app. The next morning, I got an email from a sketch critique group I'd never joined. It had my full name, my email, and 3 paragraphs of analysis I'd never shared. I shrugged it off. That afternoon, as I sketched in the quad, I felt like I was being watched. I glanced around and spotted Lucas leaning against a tree, fiddling with his phone. I waved. He walked over and said he just installed a new app that automatically shared my art with an online community. I said thanks, gently closed my sketchbook, and headed to class. I didn't question it. But the tracking app returned, now with notifications every time I moved more than 10 feet. You just left the library. You're now at MacArthur Hall. I traced the notifications back to an app called Life Tracker. I Googled it and found a warning thread. Users complained it was spyware sold to private investigators. My stomach dropped. I called Lucas. He answered quiet. I said I kept getting pings about my location and asked if he recommended that Life Tracker thing. He said, no idea, and hung up. I stared at my phone, blood pounding. I remembered his ex, that intense comment. I wondered if he was testing to see how it felt. That night, I uninstalled every suspicious app and changed all my passwords. I texted Lucas, if you did this, stop. He replied hours later, good luck with that. My heart sank. I realized he probably hired a hacker to set this up. An exile revenge or control tactic. I felt like a puppet on strings. Over the next week, I noticed subtle shifts in my daily life. A coffee order at the cafe was ready before I got to the counter. My roommate's mom brought by a plate of cookies without me mentioning anything. Strangers greeted me by name on the sidewalk. One jogger waved and called, hi, like we were friends. I felt my privacy evaporate. One evening, I confronted Lucas at the graffiti wall where we first met. He was painting a small skull in neon pink. I demanded he explain. He wiped paint off his fingers and said, I'm helping keep you safe. Better than being blindsided. I replied that tracking someone wasn't care, it was control. He shrugged, as if we disagreed on dinner toppings. He said his ex used private eyes to see every step he took, so he figured I'd appreciate the heads up. My chest tightened. I was the subject of the same scheme. I left without another word, head spinning. I took the long way home, heart thumping with every notification. I ducked into a 24-hour diner and sat under harsh fluorescence, texting tech forums for advice. I got a tip, checked my phone's VPN logs and firewall settings. I spent the next 2 hours in a booth, eyes bloodshot as I followed instructions to block Life Tracker and any related IP addresses. The next morning, I felt a flicker of hope until my smart speaker turned on and announced, good morning, Alice. Today's forecast is cloudy with a chance of rain. My name spoken by my own device. I unplugged it and tossed it on the porch. I realized Lucas's hacker friend had probably burrowed into all my devices. Phone, laptop, even my speaker. I moved out of our shared apartment that weekend, packing light and changing my locks. Lucas texted, going to miss our midnight walks. I ignored him and left town for a few days, crashing on a friend's couch in another city. No notifications, no pings. I felt calmer. But when I returned, my emails were flooded with categorized lists. Where you been, people you meet, places you frequent. He'd exported my location history and sent it to my inbox. I reported it to campus security and filed a police complaint. They took my statement about unauthorized tracking and stalking. I handed over screenshots, text logs, notification histories. The detective said they'd reach out to tech analysts to trace the hacker. I felt a flicker of relief, though I knew these things took time. Lucas reached out one last time with a final text. "It's for your own good. You'll thank me someday." I blocked him for good and deleted every trace of his contact from my phone. I replaced my devices, bought a burner phone, and started walking different routes to class. I go to coffee shops I've never visited, stopped letting people check in on me, and disable location services on everything. It's been months, and I still feel eyes on me. Whenever my phone buzzes, I jump. I cringe at friend requests from unknown profiles. I've grown cautious, never sharing my address, never giving my number, always checking privacy settings. It's a lonely way to live, but I've learned that when someone you trust can turn private tracking into a power move, the only safe bet is to vanish from their map. I've always been a creature of routine: morning jog, protein shake, evening yoga. But when Ella asked if I'd sync our fitness trackers so we could crush our goals together, I thought it sounded motivating. She showed me her sleek wristband one Saturday at the park. Its screen blinking in the sunlight like a tiny dashboard. I admired her dedication. She was training for a triathlon while juggling a full-time job, so I agreed and clipped on my new tracker. Ella beamed and said, "We'll push each other," and I felt a spark of excitement at having a workout buddy. For the first week, it was fun. We compared step counts over coffee, exchanged emojis when one of us hit a new personal best, and sent each other goofy gifs of people collapsing after long runs. Seeing her morning run appear on my app gave me a jolt of accountability. I laced up my shoes earlier than usual so the tracker wouldn't shame me with low activity. We celebrated milestones: 10,000 steps, 5-mile rides with high fives and weekend hikes. I felt fitter, more energetic, and strangely closer to her. Then I started noticing odd stats. One morning I woke up to a notification: "Low sleep efficiency detected. Contact your coach for tips." I tapped through, but there was no coach, just a chart labeling my sleep as disturbed. I shrugged it off, assuming my tracker was glitching. Later that day, another alert: high stress levels recorded. Consider a mindfulness break. I was staring at my desk in the office, breathing normally. I closed the notification and moved on. A few days later, after a particularly grueling spin class, I checked the shared dashboard and saw a new tab labeled Health Score. My score was a number out of 100. Mine was 52. Ella's was 92. I scoffed and texted her, "Nice score, but you're cheating with all those naps." She replied with a laughing emoji and nod: "Just consistency." I shrugged and kept working out harder, determined to catch up. Then came the emails. I woke to one titled "Premium Health Insights Available." It said my tracker's data could be unlocked for personalized insurance recommendations if I upgraded to a paid plan. The company claimed anonymized aggregated data helped insurers calculate risk, lower premiums for healthy clients. I clicked out of curiosity and saw a mock-up: my real age, my average heart rate zones, my weekly mileage, all plotted on neat graphs. My stomach tightened when I saw a section labeled "High Inactivity Periods" with timestamps matching my long work meetings and weekend movie marathons. That night, I asked Ella if she'd seen those emails. She sighed and said, "Yeah, they're annoying. I ignore them." Then she paused, eyes darting to her wrist, and said quietly, "But maybe you should consider it. Insurance rates are insane these days." I nodded, even though a chill traveled down my spine. Leaving it to an insurance algorithm felt wrong, but the lure of cheaper coverage and preventive health tips was tempting. Over the next week, I started getting calls from agents I'd never contacted. They knew things they shouldn't have: the number of flights of stairs I climbed, my irregular sleep on Wednesday nights, last Saturday's heart rate spike during our hike. One agent praised my fitness profile and offered a discount if I consented to share my data continuously. I laughed and hung up, unsettled by how precise they were. I mentioned it to Ella during our usual coffee hangout. She frowned and admitted she'd referred me to a broker who specialized in data-driven insurance. She said it was the future: risk pools calculated by real-time health metrics, and she thought it was cool. I felt a twinge of anger. She literally sold my routines without telling me. I asked if she'd told the broker anything else: my job, my commute, my vacation plans. She shrugged and said they got most of it from the tracker. She didn't get why I was upset. I started digging into the app's permissions and terms of service. Buried under pages of legal jargon was a clause giving them the right to share my anonymized data with third parties, including insurance companies, healthcare startups, and marketing firms. My anonymous heart rate and location points were part of a massive fee-feeding algorithms I couldn't control. Worse, a developer forum mentioned they could de-anonymize data by cross-referencing files, meaning anyone with enough computing power could link my ID to my health history. Panic creeped in. I charted my runs on paper for a few days, letting the tracker die without charging it. I deleted the app and set my phone to block calls from unknown numbers. I felt like I'd escaped a digital prison. But then I got a letter in my mailbox from the insurance broker, congratulating me on my excellent fitness evaluation and detailing a plan with further premium reductions if shared. They included a summary of my track data, week by week, day by day. My hands shook as I held the letter, realizing deleting the app didn't delete the data pipeline already in motion. I decided I needed to sever ties completely. I confronted Ella over dinner one night, telling her how violated I felt. She sat quietly, staring at her half-eaten salad. She said she didn't mean to hurt me, that she believed in the tech and hadn't thought of the implications. She apologized, but I couldn't find it in me to forgive. I stood up, paid the bill, and walked out without another word. The next morning, I called my insurance company directly. I insisted they remove any data they had on me from the tracker service. They said they'd note my request, but admitted once data was shared, it was out of their hands. I spent the day writing letters to data brokers, requesting data deletion under GDPR. It was a maze of forms and waiting periods, and each request required proof of identity, another privacy concession. A few weeks later, I found text messages from unknown numbers offering me insider tips on my health profile. I never responded. I replaced my fitness tracker with a simple analog pedometer. I started running reps without my phone, recording mileage in a paper log. I dusted off my old yoga mat and did guided videos on a TV disconnected from Wi-Fi. Ella tried to reach out, apologized again, asked if we could talk, but I never replied. She showed up at my door once, holding a new tracker she'd returned, promising she'd canceled all her broker referrals. I told her I needed boundaries and closed the door. Now, every morning I lace up my shoes and step outside without any device measuring me. I still love my routines. The sunrise jog, the stretch in the park, but it's just me and the pavement. No dashboards, no algorithms, no insurance pitches. I realize that sometimes sharing every heartbeat with someone else, even someone you trust, means inviting a world of unseen hands into your life. I'll take the freedom of uncertainty over data-driven discounts any day. I still smile when I think about how harmless it seemed when Owen invited me over to see his vintage camera collection. He'd sent a message asking if I wanted to help him test a new lens, promising coffee and a quiet afternoon of film talk. I'd known him a few months from the photography club, a quiet guy with a soft spot for mid-century models and a neat row of leather cases. His apartment was a light-filled loft full of shelves lined with Rolleiflexes and Leicas. I thought it would be a chill way to spend a Saturday. He led me to a small desk by the window, where he set out 3 classic cameras on velvet cloth. He tweaked the focus ring on one, then handed me a silver rangefinder with a clear, gleaming lens. He asked me to speak into it like a microphone so he could test the sound attachment he'd invented. I laughed at first, amused by the idea of talking into a camera, but his excitement was contagious. He said the attachment would capture ambient audio perfectly, like a mini boom mic embedded in your favorite film gear. I leaned in and described my weekend plans, his finger-pressing record, the lens glinting in the afternoon light. After that, we spent hours swapping equipment, laughing at dust particles in our shots, sipping lukewarm coffee from chipped mugs. I felt comfortable, like I'd stepped into an old-school studio with a friend. He showed me how he'd modified each lens, tiny inlets near the glass, a hidden channel running to a micro recorder tucked inside the camera body. He bragged about the clarity of the sound. A whisper from a foot away came through crisp as a podcast. I nodded, impressed but curious. Why would anyone need that trick for a still camera? He said espionage thrillers, nature documentaries, secret interviews, lots of uses. I accepted it at face value, scribbling notes. 2 weeks later, my phone buzzed with voicemails from 3 people I barely knew: a former roommate, a friend from a party, even my boss. They were upset, demanding to know why I'd been recorded talking about private things: my salary details, my messy breakup, criticism of a mutual friend's gossip. A link followed each voicemail: an underground gossip podcast episode featuring clips of my voice edited into juiciest bits. The show's hosts speculated about my real motives, analyzed my tone, even cracked jokes at my expense. I stared at the link, heart pounding. I called Owen. He answered on the first ring, sounding cheerful. I cut him off mid-greeting and demanded to know why my conversations were appearing on a scandal show. He stumbled, voice wavering, and said he thought I knew those recordings were for his demo reel to pitch to documentary filmmakers. I told him I never consented to any of that. He apologized, promising to remove the files. I hung up, hand shaking as I opened the podcast link again. Over the next few days, the Gossip Network released more episodes, now pairing my voice with rumors I'd never mentioned, like plans to sabotage a coworker or cheat on my rent. They even dubbed in fake laughter of listeners reacting. My email filled with DMs from strangers praising or condemning me. My professional contacts reached out, some praising my candor, others shocked by my alleged behavior. I felt exposed, raw, like someone had strung my private life across the internet and framed me as a villain. I confronted Owen again, this time in person. I stormed into his loft and found him hunched over his desk, editing waveform graphs on his computer. I told him I knew about the hidden mix and that he'd sold my recordings to that podcast network. He didn't deny it. He said the producers paid well for authentic voices, that the network had a contract guaranteeing anonymity, and that he'd made enough money to pay off his broken camera repairs. He shrugged, like he was talking about selling old vinyl records, and said it was a fair trade for his expertise. I felt bile rise as I looked at his rows of gleaming lenses. Those hidden inlets had been turned against me, capturing every muttered gripe, every whispered secret. I thought about the coffee-stained mugs, the afternoon light, the sense of trust I'd felt. All gone. I gathered my things and left without another word. Over the next week, I deleted all my online profiles, changed my phone number, even stopped answering calls when my voice recognition app flagged numbers I didn't know. I emailed the podcast network's legal department, demanding takedowns and threatening action under privacy laws. They replied with a form letter citing public interest and refused. I tried reporting copyright of my voice, but they claimed user-generated content immunity. I felt powerless. I still smile when I think about how harmless it seemed when Owen invited me over to see his vintage camera collection. He'd sent a message asking if I wanted to help him test a new lens, promising coffee and a quiet afternoon of film talk. I'd known him a few months from the photography club, quiet guy with a soft spot for mid-century models and a neat row of leather cases. His apartment was a light-filled loft full of shelves lined with Rolleiflexes and Leicas. I thought it would be a chill way to spend a Saturday. He led me to a small desk by the window, where he set out 3 classic cameras on velvet cloth. He tweaked the focus ring on one, then handed me a silver rangefinder with a clear, gleaming lens. He asked me to speak into it like a microphone so he could test the sound attachment he'd invented. I laughed at first, amused by the idea of talking into a camera, but his excitement was contagious. He said the attachment would capture ambient audio perfectly, like a mini boom mic embedded in your favorite film gear. I leaned in and described my weekend plans, his finger-pressing record, the lens glinting in the afternoon light. After that, we spent hours swapping equipment, laughing at dust particles in our shots, sipping lukewarm coffee from chipped mugs. I felt comfortable, like I'd stepped into an old-school studio with a friend. He showed me how he'd modified each lens: tiny inlets near the glass, a hidden channel running to a micro recorder tucked inside the camera body. He bragged about the clarity of the sound. A whisper from a foot away came through crisp as a podcast. I nodded, impressed, but curious. Why would anyone need that trick for a still camera? He said espionage thrillers, nature documentaries, secret interviews, lots of uses. I accepted it at face value, scribbling notes. 2 weeks later, my phone buzzed with voicemails from 3 people I barely knew: a former roommate, a friend from a party, even my boss. They were upset, demanding to know why I'd been recorded talking about private things: my salary details, my messy breakup, criticism of a mutual friend's gossip. A link followed each voicemail: an underground gossip podcast episode featuring clips of my voice edited into juiciest bits. The show's hosts speculated about my real motives, analyzed my tone, even cracked jokes at my expense. I stared at the link, heart pounding. I called Owen. He answered on the first ring, sounding cheerful. I cut him off mid-greeting and demanded to know why my conversations were appearing on a scandal show. He stumbled, voice wavering, and said he thought I knew those recordings were for his demo reel to pitch to documentary filmmakers. I told him I never consented to any of that. He apologized, promising to remove the files. I hung up, hand shaking as I opened the podcast link again. Over the next few days, the Gossip Network released more episodes, now pairing my voice with rumors I'd never mentioned, like plans to sabotage a coworker or cheat on my rent. They even dubbed in fake laughter of listeners reacting. My email filled with DMs from strangers praising or condemning me. My professional contacts reached out, some praising my candor, others shocked by my alleged behavior. I felt exposed, raw, like someone had strung my private life across the internet and framed me as a villain. I confronted Owen again, this time in person. I stormed into his loft and found him hunched over his desk, editing waveform graphs on his computer. I told him I knew about the hidden mix and that he'd sold my recordings to that podcast network. He didn't deny it. He said the producers paid well for authentic voices, that the network had a contract guaranteeing anonymity, and that he made enough money to pay off his broken camera repairs. He shrugged, like he was talking about selling old vinyl records, and said it was a fair trade for his expertise. I felt bile rise as I looked at his rows of gleaming lenses. Those hidden inlets had been turned against me, capturing every muttered gripe, every whispered secret. I thought about the coffee-stained mugs, the afternoon light, the sense of trust I'd felt. All gone. I gathered my things and left without another word. Over the next week, I deleted all my online profiles, changed my phone number, even stopped answering calls when my voice recognition app flagged numbers I didn't know. I emailed the podcast network's legal department, demanding takedowns and threatening action under privacy laws. They replied with a form letter citing public interest and refused. I tried reporting copyright of my voice, but they claimed user-generated content immunity. I felt powerless.